And we are live, supposedly. Uh, this is more of. Oh shit. This is a continuation of the haphazard. Oh, I keep clicking. Don't do nerve damage, you won't be able to control your hands. They get a mind of their own. Stop clicking things every time I'm trying to do stuff. I'm that guy who just randomly shoots in the middle of games. But a haphazard catch up on my affidavits and American Virtual. I just know how to catch Morpin on his pretty side. You just don't get Morpin like I do. But unlike Morpin, I won't be putting no quotations around Culture Thug as a fascist. He's a fascist. You know he's a fascist. He admits he's a fascist. Still don't get the whole quote unquote thing that Morpin was doing. To be fair, I do, because then you have Haz in a different situation going, "Oh, I don't think culture thugs really our enemy." Ooh, dodgy shit. It should have set the alarm bells off in anyone's canoggin. Um, but what's it? This stream, I can TLDR it for you. Mao poo poo pee pee. Deng Xi Jinping. There you go. That's the gist of it, but there's more to it than that. There's obviously more nuances, because I wouldn't be making myself go through the torture of this fucking thing. Um, I mean, look at that smug fucking face. He's enjoying himself. No. I mean, like, there's one where it's showing, like, China doing dodgy fucking shit, and they're like, yes, China, pure economical. And I'm like, they were spying on the dickheads. How the fuck you turn around and just say, yes, very resourceful? Reminds me of any time Jeremy Clarkson has turned around to a country that's fucking oppressed by imperialism and gone, industrious little fellows. Like, it doesn't rub me the right way. Uh, but we'll let things speak on ceremony for itself and let the fascists go on with what they have to say, and you'll start to notice an interesting pattern with these fuckers and the Morpinites and the other Dengoids, CPI or not, Patsock or not, dare I say it, the Mecha Tankies. Enjoy the video.
Cultured Conversations is going to be a bi-weekly show that'll focus on a single pertinent topic each episode. Our first episode is going to deal with China, modern China in specific. So I guess since we start with modern China, we'll start with Mao. So Mao, how did Mao get into power here? How do we start? How does Mao become the first communist dictator? Paulo, do you like that?
Sure. The audio was cutting out a little bit, so I was just making sure it was good to go. Yeah, so I guess you can look at China for much of its history as being composed of, many dynasties. And so in the modern era, you had the Qing dynasty, which fell apart. And a lot of that was sort of due to the inability to trade with foreign countries and a lot of the sort of isolationism that was, sort of prevalent in the country at the time. And the exertion.
Well, actually, what was causing the straggling of the Qing dynasty would have been well, not just that dynasty, but actually a fair few dynasties were crashed due to the Opium Wars. It had an everlasting effect on China, still to the point of which the revolution was going down. The British and their lackeys over in Canada, were grooming China to be an ally empire. especially when it came to the era of the Republic of China. They were very balls deep in there when it came to trying to groom China into what would be the word? Putting them under their boot, essentially. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
Portion of foreign powers that
Of course, when you get a bunch of white people together, they forget the Anglosphere existed. Like, they forget that part of the situation.
sort of gave the country a lack of like strength and power. And so you see these two groups that are sort of coming to power.
That's a fucking statement. Strength and power. What a way to word it. Like, I forgot how funny the start of this
Power
video
you
is.
see, in sort of the southern area of the previous Qing dynasty. And you have the communists, you have the nationalists. And as the communists and nationalists sort of unite to try to, reunite the country, fight off all these different sort of tribes, and bring the Qing dynasty back together, you have Chiang
Fight off these
Kai-shek,
different
who
tribes.
is sort of this leader of the nationalists. He, helps to establish the KMT. And it's during this time that even though him and the communists are united, he decides to turn against the communists.
It was before the era of Chiang Kai-shek that they weren't so much united as they were in a united front, which is a bit different. But Chiang Kai-shek came into power long after that relationship had already existed and had been created, and Chiang Kai-shek then pushed an anti-communist policy pretty much at the breadth of point at which he'd taken power.
And
in the middle of the war.
And that's where you kind of see Mao, and you get sort of the Long March, which is the communists and Mao and himself basically marching themselves out of the KMT zone and into more of these rural, unpopulated areas. And this this march, when you look at it, it was excruciating, and the amount of determination that a lot of these people had, I think, really kind of carried them through till the end. But as you kind of get this influence from foreign powers, you see the Nationalist Party, Chiang Kai-shek kind of coming into power, the communists sort of laying off to the side, trying to figure out what's going on. Japan comes in. They start to take over sort of the northern area of what we see as Manchuria at the time. And so basically there's not only the civil war at the time between the communists and the nationalists, but you also have Japan.
You mean it was known as Manchukuo when it was taken over by the Japanese?
Is basically
that's the Japanese name.
Very dominant military power that is absolutely crushing China. So
this is a very weird reduction of Chinese history, and like they keep going backwards and forwards in time as to where they want to talk about things. Bullet points, years would be helpful. I feel like I'm going on a roller coaster here.
So Chiang Kai-shek needs to make a decision of whether or not he wants to reunite that alliance again with the communists, or try to fight off the enemy on two fronts.
Joel's still there. Because he's a dingus.
They became partners and fought the Japanese, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, kind of. So I forgot what province they ended up in after the Long March, but they chose that sector because it was mostly rural, but mostly because it bordered on the USSR, and he was able to get arms from the USSR. And Stalin at the time, he backed both the nationalists.
I'm sure the purpose of this haphazard history will reveal itself in their more ideological commentary. I think you're right, so it's your Henshin.
And the USSR, because he wanted to use them as a foil against the Japanese. So he wasn't. Mao kept getting pissed off at Stalin because he wanted more support from him, and he wanted him to choose the CCP and not Chiang Kai-shek's faction. Mm-hmm. So.
This doesn't sound right. Anyone find that sound a bit off? I doubt Stalin was ever going to go, yeah, I'm going to choose the nationalists that have a very close relationship with Canada and the UK over the Communist Party that they'd had close relationship with for well over a decade at that point. I wonder. I need that to be proven to me. That's sus take. Very black and white thinking. Yeah, absolutely. The black and white thinking suits fascists, though. It's easy to do things through this entendre of history. It's part of the Hegelianist thunk. Yeah, for those who might not be aware, fascism is not undialectical. It's Hegelian dialectical. It's using well, I mean, I guess if you want to be like old school funky era Marx, you'd say dialectical idealism and you know, do a bit of that. But the what I would call is dialectical rationalism. That like to be a cool kid and then fling out the whole, you know, dialectical materialism is innately an empirical philosophy. It has to follow empirics. We have our criticisms of the United Front method in this time, and there were certainly contradictions between the CPC and Moscow. Not the way they are presenting it, though. If anything, it might be just the factor of not enough arms being sent their way. Mao seems like the type of person who would write an angry letter to Stalin, going, "Yo, have some more guns, you dickhead." So you know.
He did get a lot of support from the USSR during that time, but Stalin also gave support to the nationalists. And Mao acted like he was fighting the Japanese, but he really didn't fight them that much.
What the fuck? The Japanese found the fucking communists to be the most terrifying force to have to fight in them things, because it was 50-50 as to whether the ROC would even want to fight them, because there was many cases of the ROC siding with Japanese forces. You had, so what ended up happening with the ROC during the during the Sino-Japanese War is at several moments sections of the ROC would just break off and fight against both the remaining ROC and the communists with the Japanese. Like the ROC kept fracturing, splitting, falling apart. Like the United Front had so many problems in it because of this, but this actually ended up going to the communist benefits. No one could trust the nationalists in the east of China to save their fucking life after the war, because it was in the northeast more than anything. They sold the people out constantly. Yeah, I just read, quote, Red Star over China, end quote, and heard straight out of Mao's mouth his criticisms, critiques of Stalin and the CPSU. Yeah, fair income.
He mostly spent the time during World War II to consolidate his power, get rid of generals that would have fought him for control of the CCP, and use it as a way to weaken the nationalist faction at the time. So after World War II, he was in a much better position. He'd strengthened his army and his arms, and he was able to fight them because he was basically driven, like he made the Long March some magnificent victory, but really he just got his ass kicked, and he was almost completely destroyed.
They were almost completely destroyed before they did the Long March. That's why they did the Long March. This is ass backwards history. They were nearly destroyed. They did the Long March. They got better trade routes with the Soviet Union. They managed to strengthen their numbers again, rekindling the People's Liberation Army through the lumpen proletariat of the west of China. And then they reinvigorated the struggle. This is mental. Exactly. The Long March was a huge victory, literally because they were not destroyed. The fact that they managed to survive is a testament to what the Long March represents.
He had to march there just as like a last ditch effort to survive. So after World War II, he built up his strength enough to where he could fight the nationalists on his own terms.
And that's because the nationalists are doing a lot of the fighting against the Japanese. And taking
95% of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just taking the hits.
Yeah, and that's why in the 48 Laws of Power,
Citation
that technique
needed.
is used. It speaks
Yeah.
specifically about Mao having his enemy expend, all the blood, effort, time, so that Mao could take over in the end.
And he also, well, the communists also used a lot of guerrilla warfare tactics, so that became much more profitable for them in the long run, besides trying to take the enemy head on. So they not only had the nationalists as kind of like a front for them, but they also realized that standard warfare would just get them destroyed.
Yeah, Chiang Kai-shek had control of most of the Air Force at that time. I mean, I don't think Mao had anything, maybe later on,
No,
and very little artillery.
it's all
So they
ground troops.
Yeah, it was all ground troops.
So they got that goddamn Soviet artillery in it.
Okay, so, and then this is what led him to power, correct? Is there anything else we need to speak about in his younger life before he takes power, starts putting his reforms through?
I have a little bit of notes here from his early life, kind of leading up to his first exposure to communism, if you want to know about that.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so Mao was born in like a peasant valley, in a valley called Shaoshan, in the province of Hunan, which is actually like right in the middle of China. His ancestors lived there for like 500 years. His parents' arranged marriage, of course. Mao was the third son.
They're presenting Mao like this sniveling conspirator. He was not stabbing the nationalists in the back while they, in the back while they were fighting the Japanese. The CPC was the driving force of ceasing the Civil War. The point of the united front between the nationalists and the CPC was that neither could defeat the Japanese on their own, and certainly not while they were fighting each other. The CPC was far more focused on the anti-Japanese struggle than the nationalists. Yeah, the nationalists kept being focused on what will happen afterwards, which of course had to be a concern to the CPC. Any communist party would be idiotic not to be concerned with the post-war situation. But they wanted an actual post-war situation to be spoken of. The nationalists were so afraid of the Civil War to come that they decided to start it sooner than later. Opportunism is a deadly beast.
I know that typically with the Asian countries, the surname is like the first name, right? Like the family name as opposed to the last name is the first name. So it was the Mao family. And it's Mao Zedong, if I'm saying that right. And Se is to shine on, and Tung, it means the East. Okay, so Mao to shine on the East. That's what they named him. And the reason, kids got names like that was supposed to like the parents had like high expectations. Just that was just kind of the culture. And the idea was that young men of any background could pass. And there's a quote from it's from the Mao the Unknown Story.
The Asian
Could pass imperial
countries.
examinations and become like proper man.
I was thinking that. I'm like, okay, yeah, there are countries that are like that, but you can't just go, yep, the Asian countries, the last name's the first name, and it's like, okay, you could go in China, and even that's still okay, depending on the culture. Well, there's 56 different nations in China. China itself is a collection of Asian countries. It's fucking... I know as soon as it was going to be a synopsis on Mao's history, it was going to get bad. Of course, they have to do the fucking ethnic test. It ain't now, what's his ethnicity?
Possibly become the next prime minister and all that jazz. So whatever they named their kid, it's supposed to emphasize like the expectation of that kid. He's supposed to do well, become.
Of course, it's the one who sounds like they're from the UK that's fucking getting the eugenic book out quickly. Hey, now, turn your eugenics to page 362.
I'm a friggin' prime minister, so on and so forth. Just a little bit more. Mao loved his mother. She never raised her voice at him, apparently. She was a Buddhist, and because of that, he was a Buddhist too, which didn't really last long. And it's interesting that, he would ever call himself that because, it's fast forwarding a bit. I'm sure you know a lot of the death toll that he's responsible for during peacetime when he got control of the country. So he's no freaking Buddhist.
No, you.
But yeah, that's just a little bit of info on him. Little interesting fact. The diary of Mao's teacher, or one of his teachers, Professor Yang Zhangji, on April 5th, 1915, he wrote this exact quote: my student Mao Zedong said that his clan are mostly peasants and it is easy for them to get rich, end quote. So this guy Mao had this sort of, even in his youth, this elitist or bourgeois, whatever the word is, mentality, where even though he's part of the peasant class, he doesn't really have respect for his neighbors. So that's just kind of getting into his mind, and honestly just kind of looking at the rest of his life moving on.
Even though
doesn't
the
really
crux
change.
of Maoist ideology is basically the revolution of the peasants as opposed to the proletariat.
Right. Emphasizing that, but in reality, you get to know this guy Mao, and he doesn't seem to really care. And that was, his teacher noticed that. So, what else? Okay, so just one thing. Spring 1913, Mao was 19 years old and in college. Quote directly from the Mao book here. The college embodied the open-mindedness of the time, end quote. Okay. And what that's supposed to mean is, pre-communist China, there was this period where people were actually open to ideas. So here's Mao in college in this European style
actually
looking
be
building.
American, It just sounds like
And
he's from
students
fucking.
kind of getting into their own, I don't know
like
if
he's
it's
from
after
East
school clubs
Graden.
or what, but their own groups. There were student publications for anarchism, nationalism, Marxism. For a while, there was actually a portrait of Marx hung in
The child when he's a mass murderer later in life, pure fucking idealism. Guys, if he didn't think ahead of time, that is his fault. You're overthinking it.
Telescoping.
the school auditorium. Mao saw the word socialism in one of the commie papers, and that was kind of like the first precise moment of Mao being exposed to that ideology, that end of the spectrum, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And it started from there.
yep.
The political autism spectrum.
Let's see. Yeah, the rest of my notes is just some more
present to this day.
like letters from guys that met Mao. But I think that's enough. So.
All right. Well, let's jump forward to the Great Leap Forward. So Mao and the Soviet Union kind of had a break. Mao wasn't, especially after the death of Stalin, wasn't too interested in being and copying the path of Soviet Russia anymore. So this starts the Great Leap Forward. The Great Leap Forward campaign began during the period of the second 5-year plan, because communists like to make 5-year plans, which was scheduled to run from 1958 to 1963, though the campaign itself was discontinued in 61. Crops deemed by the party full of evil, such as opium, were destroyed and replaced with crops such as rice. So at least they are looking at, because that's what the outside world wanted to exploit, just like with Afghanistan today was the opium in China. So it is good when someone gets into power and automatically gets rid of the vice that the rest of the world is trying to take advantage of them for.
And that's how the British had controlled them during the Opium Wars.
Yep.
Oh, now they bring the opium
by
wars
1958, private ownership was abolished and all households were forced into state-operated communes. Mao demanded that the communes increase grain production to feed the cities and to earn foreign exchange through exports. So this was something the Soviet Russia did as well. They, made communes, and then they focused all the output to help the industrialization process. So essentially taking all of this food out of the peasantry and into the industrialized, which, as we're going to see, leads to problems, just like it did in Russia. Same kind of thing,
Yeah.
starvations and crime amongst each other
No.
for food,
Not
and
how that
persecution for
works.
not adhering
If
to
you feed the people, they
what,
starve.
the state rule of what the peasants should be doing.
Not how it
So,
works.
by
They killed all the landowners. Or they
Well,
at least
yeah.
started executing landowners. So anybody who had any real skill or knowledge
They are
or any sort
botching
of
this.
leadership during this whole
Yes, Mao
time were
became mass
basically
murderer
being forced
dictator when he
out.
saw the word socialism in a
So it's just
newspaper
like
in his
you have
youth.
this whole peasant class who they're
Yeah.
trying to convert to industry, and it's like they barely even have a hard enough time sustaining the agriculture themselves.
Well, and Mao was, so they collectivized all the farms, and Mao was whatever grain or rice that they produced, he was giving it to Stalin so he could get military technology.
Mhm.
And he was trying to rapidly industrialize. I think he was just trying to do it too quickly. He wanted industrialization to be completed by the time he was dead, instead of it being like a multi-decade process like it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I
Also
didn't get
during-
to look in, I was just gonna say I didn't get to look into it too much.
No, it was always gonna be a multi-decade process. I mean, it was with the Soviets. Like, yeah, they got the initial industrialization done in about 10 years, but they still had processes to go about things. Stalin didn't reach World War II and go, yep, no, we're done with industrializing. No, they reached, Stalin's conclusion that was made towards the state was that we don't need to industrialize the military anymore, or quit doing that so much and focus on industrializing the other regions of the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union was falling into the trap of uneven development, which eventually it went full blown down the whistle with in the post 1957 coup.
But he actually did have Soviet officials overseeing the Great Leap Forward.
Mhm.
So he had some specialist help in this whole thing, but even they, I guess, somehow either they didn't care, or it's just like they just didn't see the fact that transitioning to this industrial economy so quickly was just a nightmare.
No. There was a class struggle in China. Like, class struggle always ignites at the point of revolution. So the petty bourgeoisie were doing everything they could to strangle the industrial development of China. They weren't against industrialization. They were against a class force that they didn't support leading that industrialization. It was, it's a pedantic issue, really. It's a power issue as to whom is leading the society that was the problem with these people, not the process of advancing or improving society.
Yeah.
Part of it was the specialist that they brought over, but the other part was, since he'd purged everybody, they didn't have people in China that could catch on to what the specialists were trying to implement that quickly. They just didn't have the talent.
They were also punishing people who
said about
did
the
too
Soviet
well.
Union. Like everyone, every time. Oh no, the purges. They slowed them down. It's like no.
It was pretty much the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, and we got to get into this as well. Like, being a peasant a moron, it does not make you. Like, you don't become fucking stupid because you come from the peasantry. Ignorance can exist in all classes, in all areas, and anyone can be driven to a point of intellectuality and can specialize in any degree where they can operate. I mean, Stalin talks about this in many of his speeches on the application of cadres.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Mao was literally on the opposite side of the hyper-industrialization debate. Didn't you know in capitalist countries all food that is grown is kept by the exact farmers who grew it? They're completely botched. Yeah, absolutely. But it's like you know, the distributive communal system comparative to the capitalist profit system. These dickheads will fetishize profit over community every time. That's even if Oswald Mosley calls fascism uh collectivized individualism. Um
Mm.
but you know, like if the Soviet Union themselves made the mistake of thinking that they had to gate herd political power until the rest of society was big brainy smart enough to engage in political power, which shot them in the foot because then the petty bourgeoisie just got a massive foothold in the political system of the Soviet Union, and it shot them in the foot big time. That's when
Yeah,
like
even
57 guy
despite the
comes from.
purchase, it got very bad.
Sorry, go on.
I was just saying that even despite the purchase, it was really bad at the end. Like Stalin couldn't even do more another purge because there were so many petty bourgeois stopping him, right?
Especially after World War Two.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of good comrades died too after during World War Two. So there's that.
The party went from having three-quarters of it incorporated, three-quarters of it proletariat in background. If you look to their history pre-Russian Civil War, to post-World War Two, where the petty bourgeois element of the party dominated 70% of its ranks, and to
Mm,
rekindle its ranks, Khrushchev and the revisionists stocked it with industrialists, not the industrial proletariat, with farm administrators, not the agricultural proletariat.
yeah,
because they
that's a
they
fact.
wanted everybody to be equal, you know, to stick to the socialist principles. So there was no, I mean, not to jump ahead too much, but I mean that's something that Deng Xiaoping implemented was giving people rewards, giving workers rewards for who did well, as opposed to punishing them for not doing enough or doing too much.
What the fuck?
Yeah, a good reward to keep working is to, don't have food. Yeah, that's a good reward.
Starve, motherfucker.
Yeah, it's ironic. I don't get how much capitalism projects on other things. It's like, oh, socialism, you starve all the time. You need a profit incentive. Yeah, that's not how it works. You know. Besides, if you get fucking, if you get food, water, everything you need to live, and more, like, why would you need money in the first place? Money is unnecessary.
Money is goddamn evil. I mean, socialism should seek to eliminate the use of money as soon as possible. It shouldn't be necessary. You
Yes.
know, as soon as you get to a poignance of post scarcity, money can just fuck off completely. But even before then, the labor voucher system should be acquired as soon as possible. You shouldn't be messing around with money that's directly tied to finance capital, because when you have used the same money for your uh, uh same money for your society as you would for trade, you then tie everyone's um the capital of the proletariat to the finance capital of the global market, and you put your entire society at jeopardy. Not the TV show, the impending crisis. Um, the TV show is a bit of an impending crisis as well, so not getting clearer.
or getting too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
The party also implemented major social changes in the countryside, including the banishing of all religious and mystic institutions and ceremonies, replacing them with political meetings and propaganda sessions. So interesting, saying he grew up a Buddhist. Attempts were made to enhance rural education and the status of women, allowing them to initiate divorce if they so desired, and ending foot binding, child marriage, and opium addiction. Mao saw grain and steel production as the key pillars of economic development. He forecast that within 15 years of the start of the Great Leap, China's industrial output would surpass that of the United Kingdom. So, well,
Well, we see how that worked out in hindsight.
This point.
forecast that within 15 years, steel production as the key pillars of economic development.
Yeah,
He
steel
forecast that
production. Yeah, that was with the Soviet Union. I mean, the Soviet Union, it took them 15 years to meet Europe on steel production, and then by 1948, they outpaced the British Empire on steel production. So, not impossible.
In 15 years of the start of the Great Leap, China's industrial output would surpass that of the United Kingdom. So, well,
Well, we see how that worked out in hindsight, right?
well, history shows us, and as we'll see, that the Great Leap Forward was actually like a stumble backwards for them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so the amount of labor diverted to steel production and construction
It was a bit of a stumble backwards, and that's why the Cultural Revolution happened, to deal with the fact that the petty bourgeois interference in the Great Leap Forward's aims and efforts caused a stumble backwards for the Chinese socioeconomic development.
projects meant that much of the harvest was left to rot uncollected in some areas. This problem was exacerbated by devastating locust swarms, which caused when their natural predators were killed as a part of the Four Pest campaign.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they took out their natural predator, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they ended up getting swarmed with locusts.
What's really funny too is because Mao wanted to free China from the need to import steel and machinery, he wanted the everyday citizenry to like set up backyard steel furnaces where any citizen can turn scrap metal into usable steel. And he placed quotas on people to create steel as opposed to in some areas where they needed grain, right? But the quota said we need this much steel, even though they might have needed grain. They would melt down their farming equipment. And because most of these citizens were not trained in metallurgy and had no idea how most of this worked, they're just melting. They're creating essentially what's like useless pig iron that could not be used for anything. And they essentially created useless steel that just was worth nothing. So it's really kind of awful what happened.
Yeah, there was a lot of folly there, and that's why they, as Mao passes, they completely changed from the way he was running the country for good reason. And one of them is the famine deaths. I mean, the exact numbers are hard to really determine, but they range anywhere from 15 million to 55 million people who died of famine, alongside other things, execution and whatever else. Yang Zhexing, a longtime Communist Party member, reporter for the official Chinese news agency, puts the blame squarely on Mao.
Yeah, they didn't banish religious practices. They just stopped the state from directly supporting it, and it crumbled on its own. I mean, it's like, fucking the institutions of conglomerative political power shouldn't be allowed for religious institutions. They're absolutely correct in any revolution to think in that respect. But Mao, Lenin, people like that, they weren't opposed to religion existing in society. I mean, even if they themselves were a bit salty in their own experiences with religion, they just didn't want religion having power in society. Which, I don't blame them, neither do I.
Policies and the political system of totalitarianism, such as diverting agricultural workers to steel production instead of growing crops and exporting grain at the same time. Once again, to Russia, like Bill just brought up. During the course of his research, Yang uncovered that some 22 million tons of grain was held in public granaries at the height of the famine. So 22 million tons at the height of the famine is there for the people, but either through corruption or incompetence was not able to be dispensed to the people. Reports of starvation went up the bureaucracy to be only be ignored by top officials, and authorities ordered that the statistics be destroyed in regions where the population decline became evident. So Not
Once again, A, citation needed. B, which faction was telling them to destroy the evidence of the situation. And C, yeah, of course they did that because the people whom were causing those deaths were using those famines as political tools to push their own intent. That's class conflict. That wasn't the proletariat supporting faction of Mao and the Grand Gang of Four. No. That's the the petty bourgeois, the petty bourgeois loving, Deng Xiaoping, Hu Jintao, Zhu Enlai, those fucking dickheads. You know, Mao Zedong and the Gang of Four were firmly in solidarity with the proletariat and the lumpen proletariat and the lower peasantry of China, while these dickheads sided with the petty bourgeoisie, the fallen capitalists, and the upper peasantry of China. This was a distinct class conflict that went down. Interesting that they shit at the Great Leap. Usually lib fascist types low-key praise the Great Leap, criticize the Cultural Revolution, and then characterize the Deng period as the Great Leap but good. They might still end up backing around and doing that because they revere Deng and Xi and dickheads like that as China getting its shit together.
not much caring for the peasants at that point in life. I mean, I understand they're focused on industrialization, literally like Russia was, and they're willing to break as many amount of eggs as they needed to make that omelet. But when people try to portray that, you know, oh, they had a loving for the peasants and building up the country, they wanted to build up the country, but even at the expense of others, if necessary.
Well, and they were kind of under the thumb of the Soviet Union as well because they didn't have a large.
Not only is that wrong, but since when were the fascists fucking bothered about that type of mentality? If anything, that's their fucking jam. That's their fucking egg and potato salad. What they jive for.
That's true.
Enough economy to be able to sustain themselves. So their whole relationship with the Soviet Union was absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Well, and it wasn't so. Also, kind of like Lindbergh was talking about with the steel production, many of these people lied about how much grain they produced as well. So then the central government took those numbers at face value and said, "Oh, okay, well, we have enough grain left over that we can export this much to Russia," and that wasn't the case.
Yep.
In some cases, like you were saying, CT, they had these huge granaries full of grain, and then in other places they didn't have anything because the quotas, they actually hadn't met their quotas.
Yeah, and a number of county level officials were publicly tried and executed too for fudging these numbers. Some other higher up people were dismissed from the party.
Citation needed.
So yeah, there was definitely people fudging numbers, but why? Out of fear. They wanted to say, no, we've produced too. We have this.
And Mao also had to put the blame on others, so that the blame of the famines and the blame of the hardship in the country had to be put on somebody else but himself.
Of course.
Well, that's one thing I was going to mention earlier is that he was a nationalist at first, and then he became a communist, and then a nationalist again, and then finally a communist again. He wasn't.
Once again,
he wasn't like some communist ideologue. He didn't really care about the people or the peasants. The reason he chose communism is so he could gain power. So this affected China during his whole reign because he could never admit to mistakes. It was always somebody else's fault. He even purged people that had the expertise he needed just because he was worried about them gaining too much power.
Yep.
Yeah, just to protect his image.
Yeah. Speaking of that, he ends up stepping down in 1959 as the state chairman, but remains as the state PRC chairman, but remains the CCP chairman. Liu Shaoqi, I don't know if that said Shaoqi, the new PRC chairman, and reformist Deng Xiaoping becomes the CCP general secretary. Were left in charge to change policy and to bring economic recovery. So obviously, he even knows he needs to step down from the main spotlight and being the person that's kind of guiding the economy after the failure that was the Great Leap
So
Forward.
it's so fucking wrong when they characterize this period as quote unquote totalitarian, when the political situation was in constant turmoil and civil war nearly broke out again. I mean, there's actually a quote from Mao where he turned around and said, I'd ought to be better off going back up to the mountains and fighting another revolution at this point. Like, fucking. And 3 months before he died, he was quoted to have said, the state of China at that point in time, it needed a new revolution if it was ever going to survive. So there's that one for you.
And then he stepped down until what, like
62.
right?
Yeah, no, by 62, it was clear that the party had changed away from the extremist ideology that led to the Great Leap. During 1962, the party held a number of conferences and rehabilitated most of the disposed comrades who had criticized Mao in the aftermath of the Great Leap. So they're bringing the people back Mao chased out. The event, again, discussed with much self-criticism, and the contemporary government called it a serious loss to our country and people and blamed the cult of personality of Mao. In the years that followed, Mao mostly abstained from the operations of the government, making policy largely in the domain of Liu Xiuqing and Deng Xiaoping. Maoist ideology took a back seat in the Communist Party until Mao launched the Cultural Revolution. This is what you're referring to, Limber.
Yeah, in
1966, yeah, which marked Mao's political comeback.
Well, I'm sure whatever happened next was great and had no problems whatsoever.
No, yeah, it worked so well the first time. Let's try it again, boys. So he comes back, but he had supporters. I mean, he was a cult of personality. Yeah, people can't forget that because even though they brought people back into power that he kicked out because they criticized them, he was still able to launch this cultural revolution that lasts 66 to 1976, so a decade. It was launched by Mao Zedong. Its stated goal was to preserve Chinese communism by purging remnants of capitalist and traditional elements from Chinese society. During the Cultural Revolution, political dissidents of the revolution were censored and prosecuted. In addition, many elements of China's history, such as statues, were destroyed. Sound familiar? The revolution marked Mao's return to the central position and power in China.
Those damned Maoist anti-slavers in America knocking down those statues. It's the same thing, guys. Ignorant of the context. Exact same thing. There's similarities there, but it sound familiar. This is cringe.
Beginning with the Red August of Beijing, massacres took place across the mainland China, including the Wanzi massacre, Guangxi massacre, for anyone that wants to look that up, in which massive cannibalism also occurred, which usually happens when there's no food and people are reduced to that. Meanwhile, tens of millions of people were persecuted. Senior officials, most notably Deng Xiaoping, among many others, were purged or exiled. With the fragile economy and Zhu falling ill to cancer, Deng Xiaoping returned to the political scene, taking up a post vice premier in March of 1973. On September 9th, 1976, Mao Zedong dies. So, I mean, Deng Xiaoping, we'll get into him in a little bit, but a very interesting character. He's been chased out and brought back so many times from the party. It's like Mao hates him, but he needs him at the same time. So, estimates of the death toll from the Cultural Revolution, including civilians, Red Guards.
Mao is the chief communist theory of the mid-20th century at the very least. Yeah, trust me. He's a fucking inspires people to this day. China is probably the strongest revolution we've had. Or was. Was is the key word there. Fortunately, it's lost its standing.
Yeah, that's true.
50 years ago.
Very greatly, ranging from the hundreds of thousands to 20 million. Once again, with all these numbers, there's never going to be an accurate number for any of these things because the data is so bad and there's really not much you can pull from that's going to tell the full toll of the situation. The exact figure of those persecuted died during the Cultural Revolution, but will never probably be known. There's so much unreported and everything. So Mao passes away. Do we have anything more to add about Chairman Mao before we go into Deng Xiaoping?
I guess the only interesting thing about this whole time period of when Mao comes to power after World War II, there's a period of a lot of conflict in foreign relations. So you have the Korean War, you have the Vietnam War, you have the Cold War, which is with the United States and Russia, a lot of tensions between the U.S. basically going against Russia's nuclear programs and things like that. And just realizing how China is kind of still under the foot, under the boot of the Soviet Union, and there's kind of just this back and forth that sort of Mao has to play a little bit in terms of what he needs to do to kind of balance out this situation, because he wants to get rid of the Soviet Union. He considers after Stalin dies, I forget who the next, I think it's Khrushchev.
Khrushchev.
Khrushchev's the
Yeah,
second
comes into
guy after
power
Stalin.
and basically rejects the entire Stalinist ideology. And Mao is in this huge uproar as to the
Stalinist.
fact that he basically wants to celebrate Stalin now, and that he's looking at
This Apollo
the
geezer
Soviet
is a
Union
fucking
becoming more and more
dumbass.
friendly with the United States and becoming more of a world capitalist power, global capitalist power. And there's really a threat there within sort of this kind of communist revolution and the strength of not only China but the countries that are allied around China as well. And even with what's going on in Britain and Nepal and sort of the involvement with the Tibetan liberation movement. I mean, there's so much that goes on, and you could spend a lot of time in getting into this, but it is just interesting to look at things going on outside of just kind of what's internal to China at the time.
Yeah. Stalin and Mao's relationship had really deteriorated before Stalin died. And so Mao used when Khrushchev was stepping away, he had that secret speech where he was like, Stalin is the reason that we have all these problems.
Mm-hmm.
Mao backed up Stalin because he was trying to assert himself as the world communist leader. And that really helped him to do that. And
Fucking. Yeah, heard it here, folks. All those MLs that try and pull that bullshit, they're pulling shit that fascists like to talk. No. Mao didn't hate Stalin at his death. I mean, Mao was heavily critical of Stalin, yeah, and Stalin took most of Mao's criticisms on the fucking chin. Complete black and white ideation of history. They don't care for the truth. They just want to push a narrative.
Yeah.
I was reading this book by Kissinger, and he was talking about how Mao, most people, when they play world politics, they're trying to get people to come to the drawing board and get along. But Mao, his whole political strategy with the U.S. and the USSR was to get them pissed off at each other and increase conflict, because he thought that would give him power and keep the spotlight off of him.
Yeah.
What was it about Mao's personality, though, that made him a cult of personality? Because when I see him, I feel the same with Stalin. I really don't see much that kind of feeds into being a cult of personality of a person, like a character, someone who spreads energy to his crowd. You watch a Hitler or Mussolini speech, and you see they're full of energy, and the crowd's full of energy. I haven't noticed that with Mao. Am I missing something there, or what?
Guys, they're just not as fun as us. We get all the energy, and they're just plain. They all watch Stalin or Mao ever speak. Barely get a chance to speak because everyone's cheering. Fucking. It just. Big shouty man with mustache and big shouty man with funny hats. That's your appeal. That's your appeal, man. I ain't gonna. I ain't gonna shame you for your kinks.
Stone.
What was his allure?
His writings.
His writings.
Yeah,
So, when people call themselves Maoists, I always ask them, are you following his actual doctrine, what he implemented, or are you following his writings? And always they're following his writings. But his writings are very different from what he actually.
They're just following his right. We're just ignoring every bit of praxis. Marxian theory is indicative of the process of praxis, theory, praxis. This is some proper cheesy dog shite.
Yeah, a lot of people like to claim that fucking communism is all about theory and nothing but in the practice. I think they're going on that one. Which is shit.
make Mao's so dog shit. People don't even look to him for what he's done. It's all just about what he's written. It's a reduction argument. When you're arguing from a position of reduction, you're looking to obfuscate and obscure everything you can about the topic of which you're arguing.
Implemented. His writings are very good, and all this high-minded ideology about caring for the peasants and equality and all this shit, but none of that was implemented during his time, or very little of it. So that's what people were drawn to.
I think as
Fuck
well
off,
as like what we
Bill.
talked about earlier with the basically they considered it very shameful that they were under basically the control of British powers for such a long time, and it wasn't until after the war and Mao's rise to power that they were almost redeeming themselves. It was like they were becoming a people and a culture and a nation again. So that kind of
56 nations.
with Mao being this person up front trying to push things forward in that direction, I think that's what kind of led the Chinese people to really want to follow him.
Yeah, because they've been ruled like the Qing
Khrushchev.
dynasty was what were they? They weren't Hans. I forget what
No.
they were.
Bussy
No.
Chev.
They were Manchu. So he really played into that as well. Like we've been ruled by these foreign powers for not only since the British, but for hundreds of years, and now it's our time.
No, not how they're presenting it, but we do actually have the kind of contradiction of Khrushchev demanding that the Soviet Union take land from them that was originally claimed by the Russian Empire. There is that contradiction, but they're obscuring
Thailand.
decades worth of conflict into 5 minutes of rambling.
Yeah. It's like didn't the Soviet Union started to claim like lands in Manchukuo when fucking Khrushchev
Manchukuo
was
is the
in power?
Japanese name. Manchuria. Manchukuo didn't
Manchuria,
exist
sorry.
anymore. Manchuria.
Sorry. I'm bad with names, sorry.
Yeah, not just Manchuria, and a lot of other areas in China as well. In the parts of the west of China too. Manchuria and part of the area just west of Manchuria as well. They wanted some of that. They wanted to take land off of Mongolia as well.
So seen as that liberating force then.
Liberating force. Yeah.
And that's kind of what sort of I think appealed, or that's where the appeal was in terms of him kind of leading a lot of the communist people against Japan as well. Is like these people are the invaders and we need to drive them out. And that's really when you see revolutionary Mao, before he came to power, that's his main focus is to, gather these people and fight against the enemy, drive these people out. I mean, there were a lot of, really horrible things that happened in China from Japan. If you look at like the Nanking incident, I don't want to say the word because I don't
The
want to say it on YouTube,
Nanking
but
incident.
the Nanking incident
What it
is
is
something that is
Call it what it is. It was the rape of Nanking. You fucking coward. Oh no, we're talking about a crime of the fascists. We better water it down. These people are trying to boil down decades of history involving billions into the clash of individual egos and personalities. That is the cooking pot of fascism and the way it looks at world history. But it gets more interesting as they start to get into modern day China.
like they were basically just killing citizens left. The Japanese were killing citizens left and right, and it was like a video game to them.
Oh yeah, there was a famous
It's like a
competition
video
between
game
two
to
soldiers
them.
of who can decapitate the most Chinese with their samurai swords. And there was even like a news article, bragging, one had gotten 50 something and the other 60. I forget the numbers, but it was a crazy.
Yeah, they used to compete with each other on who could kill the most Chinese people, and that's not like combatants, it's just Chinese people. Evil shit. Because Mao's popularity was not based on fascist cult, it was based on correct ideas and results. Absolutely. That's why the Cultural Revolution went down the way it went down. Oh.
count. So yeah,
it wasn't just like 100 people or something. It was like thousands.
that were killed,
A lot.
or tortured, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty brutal what happened there.
Yeah.
Um,
But he also had to play politics too, because he had insiders. Mao had insiders within the nationalist government. Like Chiang Kai-shek got arrested at one point, so that's why they ended up uniting, was because Mao was able to have sympathizers in the government to arrest Chiang Kai-shek and basically say, hey, either you unite with us, or you're probably dead, or you're going to be a puppet of us.
Yeah, he was very good at espionage. He during the Civil War, like from 46 to 49, he undermined Chiang Kai-shek at every point he could.
Like, it's like with the Japanese war crimes, it just sort of breeze over really quickly. Yeah, no, they thousands, no, millions. 36 million people died in this, Japanese war on the Chinese side. Just Chinese people. Let's not get into, anything else. It's just that what the Japanese did to the Chinese people. 36 million people died.
Hey, clever. I mean, he knew what he wanted, right? He knew his goal.
Oh, he's very intelligent. Yeah.
Let's move on to Deng Xiaoping now. Yeah, go on.
So I'd like to talk about U.S. and Chinese relations before the Deng Xiaoping era.
Okay.
So when Chiang Kai-shek left and went to Taiwan, America and China didn't really have good relations because they refused. So China refused to talk to the U.S. until they recognized Taiwan as part of China, part of the CCP, and the U.S. refused to talk to the CCP until they agreed to not be aggressive towards Taiwan. So actually, from 49 to 71, China was part of the UN Security Council, but that wasn't the CCP. That was actually the Taiwanese government. They're the ones that held that, and then it transferred over in 71. But so before Mao died, he was trying to make inroads and get reconnected with the United States, because he was really separating himself from the USSR, and it took them a while to form that.
Wrong. That was Zhou Enlai and Deng Xiaoping that dominated the Foreign Policy Office. They were the ones who were trying to rekindle a connection with the United States. Mao Zedong was not very fond of this development. Wrong.
That relationship, because they distrusted each other, and really the only thing that brought them together again is to stop talking about Taiwan and what was going on there, because that was the big blockage for them for 2 decades, really.
I think it has something to do with
like today, right?
Kind of like today.
Versus
Yeah.
capitalism
It's
argument,
crazy.
but
And that's why the presidents haven't, like all of our presidents really haven't talked about it. They've kind of stayed passive about the whole Taiwan issue, because it's a big sticking point.
Yeah.
Still.
Well, I think it's Taiwan, Hong Kong, Tibet, Nepal, all those countries. There's a lot of conflict and history behind all of them.
Yeah. Even the Kashmir region.
Which we couldn't trust
India.
you guys to look
Yeah.
at the
Also like
history.
a
You
huge
guys
point
like
of
the
contention
story
still.
part. not
Yeah, we
the
didn't even have
history
That's a good thing
part.
until like 72.
Yeah, it's a good thing to point out, talking about U.S. relations, is China was pretty much just destroying India on those borderlands. Like, they just pretty much could take over whatever they wanted, but because India had British support at the time, and even some U.S. support as well, they were like being very careful about occupying that zone. And the Chinese people, the people who fought there, actually, they ended up pulling out soldiers, and Mao tried to use that as a negotiation point, but he was trying to be very careful because he didn't want basically a full-scale war in the U.S. and the British to basically, point themselves towards China, because he knew that he would just be absolutely destroyed.
Yep.
So Deng Xiaoping now, during the Cultural Revolution, he and his family were targeted by the Red Guards, who imprisoned Deng's eldest son, Deng Pufang. Deng Pufang was tortured and thrown out a window. He became a cripple because of that, of a four-story building, became a paraplegic. In October 1969, Deng Xiaoping himself was sent to...
They didn't throw him from a high enough building.
...to a tractor factory and forced to work as a regular worker. In his 4 years there, he spent his time writing.
Oh no, they forced him to be proletariat. Oh my god, no, it's not all like he was trying to destroy the system and was given it an easy time off. He should have been sent to prison. He got an easy time off.
He was purged nationally. Deng was publicly disgraced and criticized and was sent to work in the tractor factory from 1969 to 1973. So imagine that, you're taken from your rank, you're nationally shamed, you're thrown into a factory and there to work amongst the other workers. Was his punishment. I guess it's better than getting killed. But like we said, Mao knew he needed Deng and brought
Yeah, he
him back
wanted
a
to kill
couple
him.
times. Yeah.
No, he couldn't.
So after Mao's death, the Gang of Four pops up.
Citation of the citation needed. We need some extra heavy citation cubed here. What the fuck? He knew he needed him. I didn't know Mao was some like weird fucking esoteric spiritual fucking like seer, and he could just see. He knew he needed Deng at some point. It's not like there ain't a million other people. No fucking. I need to get up the quote where Mao says Deng doesn't understand the how class struggle operates or chooses purposefully to obfuscate it. It's bullshit.
It was a Maoist political faction composed of 4 Chinese Communist Party officials. His wife, Mao's last wife,
Oh, the Gang of
being
Four.
one of them.
Here we
And he was
go.
married, what, 4 times?
4 times.
4 times, yeah. So his 4th wife stuck with him to the end. He finally found that one. It took him 4 times, but he found that one. So Hua, I'm going to butcher his name. I'm sorry for all these Chinese names I'm butchering, but Hua Guilfang wanted to rid the party of extremists and successfully marginalized the Gang of Four. On 22nd July 1977, Deng was restored to the post of vice chairman of the Central Committee, vice chairman of the Military Commission, and chief of the General Staff of the People's Liberation Army. So this Guilfang brings Deng back in once again. This guy keeps going from ousted out of power and brought back into it. So by carefully mobilizing his supporters within the party, Deng then outmaneuvers Hua, who had pardoned him, and then ousted Hua from the top leadership position. So Deng finally learned the game, and he realized, I can't keep playing second fiddle to these maniacs because they're going to keep kicking me out anytime I do something or say something they don't agree with. So he takes power for himself and becomes the power. And then he allowed Hua to retain membership to the Central Committee and quiet.
How giddy they are. He fucking couped the government. He took power. They're like, you can hear the hand rubbing and the, oh yes, the beer putsch. They're having the beer putsch moment, guys. Everyone hold hands, get excited.
Retire, hoping to set the president that losing a high-level leadership struggle would not result in physical harm. So, kind of sending a good message there. You don't need to worry about violent overthrow. We can replace you, and you can go retire.
Guys,
to a
don't worry,
life.
we won't do anything horrible.
So,
we promise.
Deng defeats the Gang of Four. Mao's wife ends up dying of cancer in 1991 at the age of 77. Oh no, sorry, she was in a hospital dying of cancer, but she chose to hang herself in the bathroom, and she penned a suicide note reading, "Today the revolution has been stolen by the revisionist clique of Deng, Peng Zhen, and Yang Shakun. Chairman Mao exterminated Liu Shaki, but not Deng, and the result of this omission is that unending evils have been unleashed on the Chinese people and nation. Chairman, your student and fighter is coming to see you." So, I mean, pretty defiant suicide note. She was in prison, for her whole life. Well, until she was released because of the throat cancer, and she dies, right after that, or kills herself right after that. But to me, this kind of destroys a narrative. I see this narrative of online communists saying that China today is just like a continuation of Mao, and there's no way to say Deng Xiaoping was a continuation of Mao. They were enemies. They disagreed on many things, and Mao.
Yes, fucking actually saying something correct for once. Yes, it is not a continuation of Mao. It is distinctly something different in its character. Actually saying something correct. And this is sort of the big process that we get into here, where we're starting to dive into why fascists are quite fond of China today. Not the news source, China and its tense is in today, but also of the last 40 years. I'm funny, shut up.
wife goes to her grave saying, this man's a traitor and essentially, a capitalist and everything else, revisionist clique of all of this. So to me, it's like there's no way you could bridge the two, saying Deng Xiaoping was carrying on Mao's tradition. I would say in name only.
No, there was a very clean break. After Mao died, this clique of Deng Xiaoping and was fighting the more conservative elements that wanted to continue Mao's policies, and that's why it was a kind purge, but he had to purge all these people over the next 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. So it's definitely. I look at it as kind of like George Washington to America, right? It's like with Mao with China.
My bullshit detectors going on.
It's viewed as the founding father, so there has to be some kind of level of not just outright disrespect of that. So you kind of keep on this illusion of carrying on, like we keep the illusion on the Constitution. It's the same today as it was when George Washington was there. Same kind of thing. Maoist thing. I think when socialism with Chinese characteristics actually became a thing was when they were able really to break away from Maoism, Marxism, and all of that, and just say, we're doing our own kind of thing, our own flavor with these
Maoism
kind of set pattern of beliefs we're taking from.
They started to open up the economy and privatize things.
The socialism with Chinese characteristics thing just kind of feels like, I don't know, that's just like an excellent way of saying, we're going to do whatever now. We're the Communist Party, but you know what? Don't worry about what we're doing. Socialism is a process, guys. Don't worry about it. So,
well, to me, when I see, so there's a big part of Marxism, which is, they're trying to basically revise the Marxist theories over and over again to try to get to some sort of end goal. And that's when you get into that nitty gritty, really boring philosophical talk about dialectical materialism. But then you have actual policies, Marxist policies, which does kind of feel like there is sort of a umbrella ideology, sort of like there's third position. And it's almost like China was trying to sort of put Marxism into a Chinese sort of flavor, just like Stalin was trying to, in the Russian character.
That's a contradiction of Marxism, though. At the beginning, that's why third position was created, because they didn't like the universal mentality of Marxism, because the Marxism, nationalism, tradition, all this was bourgeois. All this needed to be destroyed. So even what I'm saying,
petty bourgeois,
is even calling something with Chinese characteristics is completely going against what Marx was originally preaching. That's why these nationalist socialist organizations started popping up, because they wanted it with Italian characteristics or German characteristics or Brazilian characteristics, right? So that was one of the big separations.
You see, this is what happens when China exists. Everyone's like, guys, but Mussolini and Hitler, they were just doing socialism with Italian characteristics, with German characteristics. No, they fucking weren't. Fuck off. What do they mean by characteristics? What characterizes socialism differently within different nations? When socialism itself is, while it doesn't negate the existence of nation, I don't think you ever really could negate nationality. Always going to exist. It goes all the way to the very old days of tribe, the earliest form of nation. Its character will change when we become international and we form along the lines of a communist society, which will be global in its prospects. The socialism has always relied on an international struggle. It's relied on the end of class, and you can't end class in a nation alone without ending it internationally. Otherwise, class will still exist on a global in a global character. No, when these people say characteristics, it's a nice way of them saying nationalism. It's a way of getting around saying that they're national socialists. Rather than saying that they're Chinese national socialists, they'll tell you that they're socialists with Chinese characteristics. It's a new mannerism of speaking. Quote, they forced Hitler to kill himself. Imagine that. Losing a war, having your office stripped and your credibility destroyed worldwide. I even heard that the Allies were even trying to kill him. End quote. Yeah, this basically the fucking mentality of how much that they fly their wheels. Like fucking, it's a spoonful of horse shit. No matter how you fucking try and bite over it, no matter which direction you take that spoon, it's always gonna be fucking horse shit with these dickheads. But they're more willing to actually show some citations and a bit, like when they get into what they like, they choose some of the weirdest shit to promote modern day China. You wait till we get halfway through this. Halfway through, there's some weird shit that they cite.
Of what the Marxists and the third positionists was that national organic expression, and that didn't exist in the communist literature of Marx, at least what he was preaching.
No, not originally, no.
Yeah, but it's been reformed
through reform and through revision. Marxist-Leninism, Stalinism, Maoism. Then you have postmodern Marxism, Western Marxism, feminist Marxism.
That's
all these different things, all these
What
different
the
flavors of it. And
Trotskyite
it's a
shit.
thing to tackle, but it's just like I would, they're always. I mean, when you look at Maoism, you see the striving for, or any sort of Marxist sort of ideology, it's a striving for equality. That there can't be any sort of people above. There can't be a class above the proletariat or above the people, and that these are the enemies. There's no class cooperation. It's basically these people need to be destroyed, and we all need to be equal. And when you saw in sort of the in the industry of China during the Maoist era, it's like they kept reinforcing this, like you can't do too badly, and you can't do too well. Everybody has to be on the same playing field, and so it's like that's one of the really, I think, umbrella ideals of Marxism that's always there.
Sense.
But at what point does it stop being Marxism? He privatized the businesses. They brought back Confucian thought because Mao had tried to destroy all that. He was burning books, killing monks, destroying shrines. And I mean,
fucking Mao, all he was just going around and doing was fucking burning books, destroying shrines, killing monks. Fucking, you sure that you ain't just been watching Rambo and stuck a picture of fucking Mao over the screen? Fucking, like, what the fuck is going on? No, do you know who were burning books? The fucking Nazis. Who the fuck are they going on about burning books? The fascists were the biggest book burners in history. Actually, the fascist state of Arizona was burning books not so long ago. As like a measure against the evils of critical race theory, because it shows the US to not look very fucking good. So they went around book burning.
they became much more nationalistic. They started bringing in the free economic zones.
Yeah.
So, well, and there's classes now. There's not like a one worker class there. There's different classes in China now as well. So we'll get into class warfare in modern China and how Marxist they are. We're just going to brush through their history a little bit more. We go into what was called Pulan Faoxing, which literally means eliminating chaos and returning to normal. So once again, this is how Deng Xiaoping was viewing the Maoist Cultural Revolution. So he says in a speech at the 11th Central Committee of the CCP, and he says, calling it a domestic havoc launched mistakenly by the leader Mao Zedong and taken a...
Yeah, but the revisionists are also fascists, so it's like fascists realizing reality more than the fascists is the way I end up reading that social tension. It's like this revisionism will always end up leading to fascism. They're too class conscious to become liberals. Like in the choice to be a revisionist, one is going to take up the positions of the third position. One is going to apply themselves towards a neo-feudal mannerism of speaking. It's why the petty bourgeoisie, Lenin goes on about this a fair bit, has always been the biggest threat to the revolution, not the bourgeoisie. The petty bourgeoisie is a more reactionary class than the bourgeoisie. We must remember that the petty bourgeoisie is just a modern name for the old feudal aristocracy, and it's the same class. They're just in a new character because of the context of the system, the changing context due to the system. Sorry, the way that the way that capitalism changes the context of their class relationship to the system. There we go. I can English, I promise.
Advantage of by the counter-revolutionary gangs, the Gang of Four, and that it was responsible for the most severe setback and heaviest losses suffered by the party, the country, and the people since the founding of the People's Republic. And what was big about this was the first time Mao was publicly criticized by a head of state, by Deng Xiaoping. And so this is the first time that was put out there for, to actually criticize this guy, because you weren't even allowed to do that. It would be impossible, especially when he was in power. What would happen to you. Some of the reforms were bringing back the academics, the scientists, and the educators back into the fold of the working class. Instead of separating them, calling them the bourgeois or the elite, people need to be penalized. In 1977, Deng Xiaoping restored the university entrance exam after its 10-year halt, reestablishing higher education system in China and changing the life of tens of millions. So we go into the Chinese economic reform. This is where socialism with Chinese characteristics comes into play. There are 4 modernizations: agriculture, industry, defense, and science and technology. So this would be where they focus on now, which is, agriculture and industry is always going to play a role, right? But now this, especially on science and technology, and defense is always going to be some part of the role, but science and technology added to it. It's kind of taken this, like Lindbergh was saying, they're making this horrible pig steal early on. So because they didn't have the science or technology, they didn't have to focus on it. They rushed towards industrialization without taking the 10, 20 years to do it correctly.
And the education was terrible. I mean, half the people didn't even know.
This is bullshit. What they expanded education massively and brought men and women into massive fields of science. In the Mao era, there wasn't a fucking Deng thing. How are you going to develop scientific enhancements without an industrialization process? And how are you going to industrialize if you haven't got a scientific process? Even the industrializations begun 300 years ago in the UK were done under a scientific leadership. Like, they didn't just shit out industry. Fucking no one can just shit out industry. That's not how fucking industrialization works. It's methodical. There we go. You gotta use a methodology to do something like that. Can't just pull shit out your ass.
Yeah,
What?
things don't just happen.
Oh, go on.
Things don't just happen.
You never know. If I pray to Dagon, maybe something will
Now I'm
happen.
confused.
You know who Dagon is, right? He's the fish god from the guy with the racistly named cat. What's his name?
Lovecraft.
Yeah, Big Titty Craft.
Yeah, with the N-word cat.
with the N-word cat. Apparently, he stopped being a right winger and a racist in like the last 3 years of his life, but he might have just been lying.
Or maybe he had too much money to care.
There's that too. That's a good point. Never thought of it like that.
Yeah, like sometimes people go from being petty bourgeois to being bourgeois, but that doesn't happen too often.
I don't know. Lovecraft was in a dodgy position in the 30s. The Great Depression shaped a lot of people into a lot of different places, but as far as I know, the guy's a big racist. Like, the whole story that I'm actually referring to, it's the one in fucking Islington, I don't know. But guy's fucking, the guy that it's about, like, it's trying to call the fucking African people of America a bunch of fish people. And that are an invading horde that are going to infect all the white people and turn them into fish people. So that's one of his many racist things. He had a big anti-Semitic streak with a lot of his fucking creations as well. Fucked up geezer.
Yeah, I can see those things.
no
what the
centralized
World War II
education system.
was.
Dude, there was someone, so I mean, the geezer's called Cultured Thug, but he puts his CT. When I was on Team Fortress 2, there was a geezer on the enemy team called CT. I just wonder, is the geezer just like an average TF2 player? Like,
No, look, no, no.
we
Okay,
found,
no,
we found a gamer.
no, no, just no. Like your average TF2 player is like a 12-year-old. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
He's
he's a bald 40-year-old, so, you know, like,
maybe he's into 12-year-olds, but he's not a 12-year-old. Maybe.
fascism basically nailed down there.
Yeah.
Uh, no, he probably is an avid TF2 player. TF2 is made up of a mix, of a slew of depressed 20-year-olds, lost 40-year-olds, and angsty 12-year-olds.
And
That's
gamblers.
basically the Gmod fucking player base as well. Autistic people and then annoying young people.
Yeah, and people who like Bitcoin but with funny names. You know.
I mean,
There
I
is a
was on
fucking
fucking. I was playing on. I think it was fucking Gmod, and it was prop hunt, and we're all just fucking yelling loads of like memes that were 10, 12 years old. This one geezer goes, "We're all like 20 with nothing better than us to do, aren't we?" It was depressing. Like he had to say what everyone knew, but no one was saying. Don't say it. Don't
yeah,
remind us that we're fucking retards.
dude. There is like a hat in Team Fortress 2 that costs like more than $1,000 or some shit like
What?
that. Yeah,
Is someone gonna buy it at some point? There is gonna be someone who's gonna buy
yeah.
it.
The people just buy it because it's the most expensive. You know, they do it to flex. It's just like the
The
golden band or some shit like
the
that.
TF2 economy.
Yeah, yeah. There is like a shitty Bitcoin economy in TF2 with all the cosmetics and shit like that.
Are you a drug dealer? Do you want to embezzle money? We'll get a TF2 shop open today.
Look,
Some dickhead will buy it at some point.
there are servers with bots in them dedicated to buying and selling uh, hat related stuff
Just
and
to
weapons.
make the extra like 20p they'd make on their Steam account, and it's on a Steam account. I don't think you can withdraw your money from your Steam account. Oh no,
Hmm.
wait, you can deposit stuff in PayPal because I remember that website thing that's used for the selling. Yeah, so they are just loading their PayPal's up with TF2 shifting money.
Yeah. Oh, my ears.
That's
It
why it's
hurt.
kind of fucking stupid that like me having the free version, I can't chat with anyone because of bots, but the bots buy and sell on the market, so they kind of have the full version of the game anyway. So like every
Yeah.
bot is just passing through that verification filter. They're supposed to stop the bots from getting the verification to speak. It's stupid.
Yeah. That's why I think the fucking TF2 team didn't do something earlier. And it wasn't only because it was only, one guy working on the game. It was because they were getting money from the whole bot crisis because
When
there
that
were
happened.
just so many bots just buying things in order to speak. It's like, you know, dumb shit. And, you know, recently they got rid of a bunch of bots though. So there's that.
Yeah, but they still want me to have to pay for it to be able to just type in the chat in ranked matches.
Yeah, I mean, I bought a little crossbow when I started playing, so
Yeah, but
the
that
game was.
requires me to have Steam money because you can't just directly buy it with your card. It's just
That's true.
pretty shit.
Yeah.
So what's it? It's one of them. I will just shout at my screen instead and believe I'm being heard.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Your autism waves go through the video game into their ears and they process it. Maybe. You know? That's
But
what I
then when
do.
I'm in the custom matches, I just turn around and go, "Hey, time for the great American pastime of genocide."
That's how I do put it.
It is what they like to do because we
Yeah.
taught them how to do it. Because it's
Yeah.
actually the great Anglo-Saxon pastime, but it's the edgy, funny thing to blame everything on the Americans when with the ones who started them. It's America is what happens when French and British people fornicate,
Oh
basically.
god. You say some curse shit sometimes, Don. You're
Well,
my friend.
it's not
You just
incorrect.
you cross the line sometimes.
I don't cross the line. That was I didn't arrange the fucking marriage. They went about it as they went about it.
And now you're talking about wokeism.
Whoa. Report me to Caleb Maupin, the king of the anti-woke Leninists.
I'm reporting you to our culture comrade here.
Don't Hazel think you're being serious and think it's a green light to go and start fucking buddying up with Culture Dog.
Don't worry, they wouldn't listen to a trans person now, would they?
They will when it suits their own interests, and they'll claim to be like great, more progressive than the progressives.
No, you're right. Shit, I fucked up.
Or they'll just be like the Nazis, where it's foiling contradictions. You
Yeah,
get Batina if you're gay, but half the SS are cross dressers.
yeah,
It's a roller coaster when it comes to fucking fascism. They can't seem to know where they actually fucking put their own 2 feet in regards to anything.
yeah. Me. I don't know. Just fascists, the petty bourgeois are very like
They're goddamn
contradictory in their
douchebags.
behavior a lot of the time, and sometimes, yeah. But they also aren't because they only care about themselves, so they're consistent. They just look for things to throw shit at you. At one point in my life, no one could technically tell shit about me because I wasn't the perfect example of what anyone wanted to be in a human being, at least in their eyes. You know what I mean? Just a white guy who didn't do no issues, who was respectful, like women,
I mean, it
and
was it was
fucking did
fantas
their
it was
homework.
fantasized over the fact, like your family fetishized the fact that you decided to learn English. Like, you really think about that
Mm,
when it comes to like the colonial relationship between the U.S. and Argentina and the whole of South Africa in general. South
yeah,
Africa, South
like,
America. I do this every time. I can't say either one without getting mixed up. South America, nailed it.
mm, well done. But like, yeah, it's like, yeah, like I was like the prime, right? The cream, and people still pull shit on me, like calling me shit names and stuff like that. They just want to attack you, and if they see you as an outsider, they will attack you at any chance they get.
Yeah.
But then if you're in their group, they will be all friendly towards you in particular. Like, they shit of like you're one of the good ones. My
Yeah, but then
friends
everyone
pull
else
out
who's just like
transphobic
you will get
jokes in
treated
front
like
of me.
shit.
Yeah,
It's just a opportunistic measure of, yeah, you're one of the good ones. You're in the N group. You know, and with one of the processes regarding yourself that comes out of it, they would be coming up regards to well, you're in our class, but you do some shit that we're not too fond of. That's gonna be their main angle and drive. anything that you do to show solidarity to the poor is going to be seen as naive and idiotic.
Yeah,
Beyond
people
anything you
have the
should do.
premise that way. Like my dad tells me to not give money to poor people. Sometimes, whenever I comment on it. That's why I don't comment on it, because he's all like, yeah, that's very nice of you, but you shouldn't give money to poor people because they're gonna drug themselves or shit like that.
They're
And
gonna
I'm
drug
like,
themselves
and
anyway.
yeah,
You giving them
it's
money or
like,
not? Is it gonna make them fucking have revelations about whether they're gonna do drugs or not tonight? Like fucking, it might help them be able to do it, but that stops them getting fucking fucked over because they've been broken to desperation and had to rob off someone to get what they need.
mm, yeah. It's just so like the petty version are very dehumanizing of like the lumpen and anyone they see below them, you know. And then they get very defensive whenever you, for example, show that you're not what they think that you're, a brute or whatever the fuck they think you are.
They
Fucking
got
dumbasses. I
very
don't like them.
hyper specific expectations of people.
Mm. But yeah, the point is middle class bad.
Petty bourgeois stinky poo poo class.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just like, "What war? We don't even know what's going on."
The enemy.
What was the literacy rate at that time? Was like worse than it was during
Shit, how quick
like the
it
Dark
is.
Ages.
Yeah, well, a lot of that changed during Deng Xiaoping. Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to make clear, though, I don't think that socialism with Chinese characteristics is Marxism. But I do think that when you look at Marxism being
Even
applied to
they
different
get it.
countries, there does seem to be
Yeah,
a
no
little bit
shit,
of like
Sherlock,
a
like-
flavors of Marxism that is trying to be implemented similar to a third position sort of ideology. And that's kind of the only point I was trying to make.
I mean, actually, they said something that I'm pretty sure you just said it's like Marxian shit being implemented in a third position.
I do want to make clear, though, I don't think that socialism with Chinese characteristics is Marxism. But I do think that when you look at Marxism being applied to different countries, there does seem to be a little bit of like flavors of Marxism that is trying to be implemented similar to a third position sort of ideology. And that's kind of the only.
Okay, no, that's not what I thought was being said then. That was stupid. I mean, China are using Marxism to cover up for their third positionism, but flavors of Marxism. Of course, there's different fucking Marxists that have different positions that compete with each other. That does exist. That's obvious. There's competition amongst liberals in regards to Wagwan. Same with fascists. I mean, just like Social Henshins said, ha ha ha. Exactly the classic East versus West fascist interstruggle.
Point I was trying to make.
Yeah, I think it's a name only, to be honest. I think they just change with the times and they use the state to be able to change it. But it's an easy out for communists because they have this new thing of no, whatever can exist until communism happens. So anything can be communism. Full out, free market could be communism if it's going to lead to communism. So
it's the same thing with this whole Deng Xiaoping theory, and then the other, sort of with the like 3 or 4 leaders up until Xi Jinping. You see this kind of thing where it's like we're doing this to enact the revolution, but we need to do this first. And so socialism, from what I could gather, socialism with Chinese characteristics is basically the sort of early ideals of what socialism is. Not necessarily socialism in a Marxist sense, but socialism in the sense of how the state can help the people, or how the people can sort of best obtain a high quality of living with health, economy, all these sorts of things. That's what I see as the word socialism when I look at, the modern kind of Chinese word. But for some reason, Marxism is still, trying to be taught in these schools. They're still trying to use these names about, like we're trying to follow the tradition of, Chinese.
I smell bullshit. This dickhead's wrong.
Marxism and all this kind of stuff, and that we need to develop. And we'll see later on that now they're trying to establish a real culture as outside of just nationalism. So Yeah, it's like, I don't know,
politically,
it's very
they're still Marxist.
confusing. It's very confusing to figure out what's this end goal. Like, are you just basically going to be a state capitalist type system forever, or are you going to actually try to enact a more Marxist theory later on?
No,
No, they're becoming
never
more
gonna do that.
privatized.
Yeah.
Well, that's
and
what it seems like.
and
That's
Deng
what I'm saying.
Xiaoping, one of the first things he did was he privatized ownership of businesses.
Fucking, at least someone has got their head screwed on. There's at least one dickhead who has actually got their ass not completely, though partially, it is indeed still connected to the arsehole, but not completely sewn to their arsehole.
Yes.
Yeah, there is
Well,
a
let's get into a
nerve
little bit.
stuck there.
There's a nerd. Nerd. Oh, 1 second. I got it.
It's like, I'm sorry, man. They just sound very nerdy. Like, and I'm the one saying it. Imagine that. I'm like the prime example of one, like, nerdy.
Nerd!
Homer, that isn't very nice.
Marge, try to understand. As a jock, it is my duty to give nerds a hard time.
There you go.
Thank you for the Simpsons clip.
We will keep
The
that.
clip no one knew
Oh
what
shit.
they needed, but we did.
You know, we
Yeah.
gotta. There we go. We
Right.
will have that just in case it is needed again at
Yeah.
another
We-
point
we
in
need
time
to
in the
sleep.
video. We gotta have it ready just in case. You never know. You never know.
Yeah. You need to have like a hotkey that whenever you press it, there's the
You need one of them
and the
fucking
clip
like
just plays.
DJ square thingy things where you can assign the sounds.
A sound box.
Yeah, but I also need Darth Sidious cackling.
Yeah.
That's for every time I bring
Wait.
bring up Caleb Marpin. He's
Yeah.
the Dark Lord of the Bith. I mean Sith.
We need another audio of Caleb saying Burger King. Mm.
Burger King.
Burger King.
Burger King.
Bit of that.
It is the place where monkeys go to enjoy a hot
Yeah, it's
bunga, the
the
Euro
sun
monk.
gorilla. It's the Sun Gorilla logo they used,
It's
Burger King.
it's like it's basically like white middle class McDonald's. It's so much more expensive. I'm like, everyone's telling me that Burger King's better to eat, better these days. It tastes a lot better than Mackey's. And I go look at the price, and I'm like, yeah, it's like saying fucking Nando's is better than KFC. It's not gonna make me go buy shit from there. Fucking pricey. Fuck that. I'll stick to the dirt cheap munchy food. Thank
Yeah.
you. Too fucking expensive, King.
By the late 70s, food supplies and production had become so deficient that government officials were warning that China was about to repeat the disaster of 1959, the famines which killed tens of millions during the Great Leap Forward. Deng responded by
Citation needed.
decollectivizing agriculture and emphasizing the household responsibility system,
Citation.
which divided the land of the people's communes into private plots. Under the new policy, peasants were able to exercise formal control of their land as long as they sold a concentrated portion of their crops to the government. So,
Yeah, and if they weren't willing to agree to the deals that the government was forcing over them, they'd have their industrial farming equipment confiscated to be given to those that would rather engage in the market extraction economy. I missed that bit out.
opening up independent farmers again, and essentially a food tax is, this much is going to go towards the government, the rest, do what you will with it. Reforms were also implemented in the urban industry to increase productivity. A dual price system was introduced in which state-owned enterprise reform in 1979. State-owned industries were allowed to sell any production above planned quota, and commodities were sold at both plan and market prices, allowing citizens to avoid the shortages of the Maoist era. Moreover, the adoption of industrial responsibility system in 1980 further promoted the development of state-owned enterprise by allowing individuals or groups to manage the enterprise by contract. Private businesses were allowed to operate for the first time since the communist takeover, and they gradually began to make greater percentage of industrial output. Price flexibility was also increased, expanding the service sector. So we're seeing a whole bunch of changes, and this is where you're really getting away from central planning and kind of Marxian socialism. At least they're completely taking it away. They're saying, well, instead of communes, we're going to give you private farms now. Instead of making everything central, we're going to start opening up privatization, all underneath the oversight of the state, which once again was a very third position kind of state philosophy and how to deal with the people and with the employers and the employees. So we see Deng Xiaoping opening that up, and China really started to grow, first under Deng Xiaoping. But we'll look at a GDP graph later on, and we could see it starts picking up thanks to him and the changes he made, which once again, he's undoing a lot of what Mao did, and he openly criticized them. So it's there's definitely been revisionism throughout China since Mao.
Yep.
Sorry, real quick. Just trying to say that about revisionism since Mao. There's this it's a book called From Rebel to Ruler. It's by Tony Sage or whatever. Okay, and just on the subject of revisionism, or I guess close to revisionism, since Mao. You know how, so Mao's in charge, right? And he's got the cult of personality, and basically the thing to do is, love the guy and all that jazz. But once he died, that sort of behavior was discouraged. So I'll just write from the text here. Heroes of the party one day can become villains the next. Lin Shaoqi was one of Mao's most ardent supporters during Mao's rise to power and became China's president in 1959. But during the Cultural Revolution, he was denounced as the number one person in authority taking the capitalist road, with Deng Xiaoping following as a close second. So that's just one guy, but a handful of the people who were, part of the, I guess, the circle around Mao, these were the people that, like in the newspapers, oh, these are the guys that we love and all that jazz. That changed immediately. And then, people would see in the newspapers, oh, we don't love these guys anymore. And if we're caught loving these guys in public, then there's consequences. So. Yeah.
Real fast. Also in December 1978, this is one of the big things. Deng announced a new policy, the open door policy, to open the door to foreign businesses that wanted to set up in China. So this starts one of their biggest capitalist growth that really comes to fruition in 2001, when China becomes a member of the World Trade Organization on 11 December 2001. After China joined the World Trade Organization, its service sector was considerably liberalized and foreign investment was allowed. Its restrictions on retail, wholesale, and distribution ended. Banking, financial service, insurance, and telecommunications in China were also opened up to foreign investment. Furthermore, China had to deal with certain concerns linked to transparency and intellectual property, which they've never given a fuck about and still don't, that the accession to the WTO underlined, and they've never respected that. But so when we look at this graph here, we see 2001. Let me pull this up. Why it keeps shrinking. We see 2001 when they get into the WTO, and then we see what that has done for their country since then. This acceleration in their GDP and everything else. To me, that was the biggest move of modern Chinese history, was entering the World Trade Organization, and this is why they are the superpower they are today. Because without that, they could still. You could see they're improving since. Deng Xiaoping. I mean, we look at Mao's greatness here, right? We look at this whole bar of Mao's greatness.
Nothing. Up and down.
Nothing. All the time he had. So Deng Xiaoping steps in, and we already start seeing, right? It starts slowly rising, and naturally, which it'll continue probably that way. But with entry into the WTO, we see how big of a benefit that's been for them, and that takes us to the modern day super economy of China.
Well, it lifted the trade restrictions, and one of their biggest problems was nobody wanted to invest in China because they weren't sure what would happen to their money. So that really helped. There's one thing I wanted to mention. So there's a big shift. In 78, 79, they really focused on the rural areas and getting their agricultural sector up because people had starved under Mao for a long time. But then after the Tiananmen Square massacre, the protests, they shifted to the more urban areas, and because they hadn't allowed private ownership of land in the urban areas or in the rural areas. So they allowed privatization of property in the urban areas. They still don't have private property in the rural areas. They allow 30-year leases. That's it. So there's this huge discrepancy between the rural population and the urban population, and most of that's because the urban areas were allowed to own private property, and that property has made them very wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the protest in '89, the CCP knew that they had to focus more on the urban areas. Because there was actually a huge disparity in
rural areas or urban areas. They need to focus on rural areas.
They had to focus on the urban areas. They hadn't been. Yes.
That's I read this book called Invisible China, and it's about the divide between the rural and the urban area, and that's still going on today. Yeah, the rural area is still very poor, but they have slowly been improving as well. So China, I think they still believe they can win that game, where the improvement's going to come sooner or later, or at a quicker rate, to where they're able to stop any potential revolutionary activities or rebellions, or disenfranchisement with the system with the rural people. But that's still a thing that exists today. They do have a large rural population that is not as doing as good as the urban people are, for sure.
Well, they won't allow them citizenship because they don't want these ghettos or these big slums like India has.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll only allow the workers to come into the cities, and they won't even allow their families to come. Still to this day, I think it's about urban wages are 2 times out of rural wages, but they used to be 3.5 to 4 times. They topped out in 2007, and they've been the disparity.
Okay, so China does move people around proletariat-wise to go work in the cities, and it does break families up. They're not wrong on that. It's just this sort of hot fire mess of, there's a lot of bullshit that they're saying, but there's a lot of truth that they're saying, but what's the mind? This is the point where they're praising them. They're praising China for this. They think it's great that China's like this. And I mean, this gets into a quote that Nick Griffin went on about, where he said that he sees China as an example of the most perfect example of nationalism in a country today. Nick Griffin's a guy who also wants the democratic system to be, quote, more like Russia, end quote.
Nice guy.
He was the old leader of the British Nationalist Party before it was broken up for being a Nazi party.
He's been getting better since then.
Oh shit.
It is improving. It is improving.
Yeah, they've been trying to help the rural areas. They created a pension system in 2008, and now 40% of rural areas have a pension plan. And they've also given them health care. It's at a really basic level, but they are trying to increase that. They still haven't they still haven't privatized land yet for the rural population.
Right. Now, is there anything on the economic past of China before we go into modern day? And with Xi.
Oh,
you go ahead. No, that's how you go.
Okay, so like you were saying with the WTO, foreign investment poured in from 2001 to 2020. But still, even though they know they needed foreign investment, they really focused on making Chinese companies, even from 2001, they focused on making Chinese companies competitive with foreign companies. They knew that was what was going to help them in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Okay, but still to this day, 60% of exports are foreign, and 75% of high technology exports are from foreign companies. But that's not as bad as it seems, because 50% of those figures are from Hong Kong, which is China, basically. And even the foreign investment that doesn't come through Hong Kong is actually from Chinese investors. It's this thing called round tripping, because there's a lot of regulations on Chinese investment. So Chinese investors will put their money in foreign companies and then use that as a way to invest in China directly, because they're able to hide they're able to hide their money and not pay as many taxes.
So they know all the capitalist games too.
They know all the capitalist games too.
Yeah.
And then, okay, there's one more major thing. So the rural provincial governments and then like smaller city governments were seizing land from the people, since they in these rural areas they haven't really owned land. They were taking land from them and then selling it to developers and then industrializing it, and they were making huge profits from that. And because of this money, they were starting to listen to the central government less. So there was a tax reform in 1994 that it basically made it to where these governments had to give more of their money to the central government. So tax receipts that were, let me see. So tax revenue went from 22% to 56% in 1994, and it stayed above 50% since then. So this allowed the CCP to centralize control more. It's still a regional corporatist model, but they are allowed to influence the different provinces because they are reliant on them.
There's the fucking buzzword. Everyone in that corporatists. You see, it's just what they're looking for. Regional corporatism, and they're not wrong. It is a regional corporatist model because of the size of the country and the massive leeway that gives them in regards to exploiting the colonial relationship of the Han-dominated and of China in the via Han dominance over the region, the west of China. Is especially an easy example in this regard, and how in which their labor force is extracted over into the more industrialized east and into the very few cities that are industrialized in the west to be productive labor force, while while there's a cultural genocide going on in the country against anyone who doesn't want to get behind the concept of a one Chinese people with the one Chinese language, of the one Chinese nation with the one true history. Fascist shit. When China is of 56 nations, not one. 56.
But hey, Stone.
Yeah.
I was wondering. Will China be the most successful example of fascism to this day?
You could argue that. I mean, they're still in power and they're now looking on to be the world's next leading hegemonic superpower. So you could say that. It's certainly quite terrifying how successful of a fascist country they are.
Yeah, I was thinking of that one. I mean, fucking. It's of course it's gonna lead a new wave of fascism throughout the world, and
Absolutely.
with the whole world's economy just going to shit because the new economic crisis that has been going on, it's most likely we're gonna see a lot of fascism, as we've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, fascism is not so simple as something as you can just explain as quote capitalism in crisis unquote. I mean, there is fascism can be that, but there's more to it than that. I would state that petty bourgeois socialism and bourgeois socialism both lead to some efficacy of fascism. Bourgeois socialism is usually when you see this neoliberalized fascism from people like Trump or Blair or Biden or Clinton's, where they want to be fascist, but they can never fully commit. They've always got too much of an alliance to liberalism that puts them into conflict with the petty bourgeois masses and what they want to push for fascism. And so there's a conflict of interest between those two groups. Bourgeois socialism has never been a very successful form of fascism, and the original neoliberals were called ordo-liberals in Germany, and they really more pushed a more fascist aim than they did a liberal one. That's why, like, you can argue that the original return of liberalism was more dictated by by bourgeois socialism, by bourgeois fascism. I don't like saying bourgeois socialism. It's a very out-of-date term. You just call it bourgeois fascism, where it's not fully committed because the bourgeois consciousness struggles to drive fascist interests. The bourgeois consciousness is more centered around liberal interests. So no matter how much they apply fascist measures against the poor, they can never commit to fascist measures against the rich. They'll always commit to liberalization when it comes to dealing with their own ilk, which cannot commit to the model and efficacy of fascism, corporatism. It seeks to stabilize the system by applying fascist measures on both the poor and the rich. It's a part of the process of class collaborationism. Class collaborationism seems almost like it's like they kind of want it, but they don't want it at the same time. They do this almost like commitment to the upper sector while abandoning the rest, and even to the point of the labor aristocracy being sort of told to, fend for yourself, you are your own thing, pull your own bootstraps up. And so, like, the petty bourgeoisie is having a scramble dealing with the careless nature of the bourgeoisie and how they're operating the relationship of the imperialist structure, which is causing the want for uprising. Why there's fascist groups, social democrat groups, and many others that want to push for their own interests in the empire, imperium, as one might call it.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
For them to give revenue back to them, because the central government is allowed to run a deficit. All of these other provincial governments and cities can't run a deficit. They have to balance their books every year, and to do that, they have to receive money from the central government.
It is a smart way of kind of imposing government without.
Anyway, they were starting to lose control.
Yeah. So we go to modern day. First, let's start with: are they still a Marxist country? And we'll go into their military in a little bit and their possible future. So we go to Xi Jinping now, and he has a 14-point basic policy. This is what's taught in their schools now, and we'll go through these 14 points. 1, ensuring Chinese Communist Party leadership over all forms of work in China. So the state oversight is there, once again, which is very corporatist. The Chinese Communist Party, 2, the Chinese Communist Party should take a people-centric approach for the public interest. Yes, the common good. This, you could say, is Marxian as well as third position, the common good, right? That's something both.
Fucking hell, he's found the common ground. Quick, sound the alarm. The common good? How fucking vague. The system designed to increase GDP, and the system not designed to increase GDP did not. Wow, how genius. I mean, gross domestic product is a very narrow mannerism to look at things, so yes, one man reversed the fortunes of billions. I am very smart.
Circles have used. I think all collectivists kind of use that common good approach. 3, the continuation of comprehensive deepening of reforms. So what does that mean? The continuing reforms, continuing to change from what the original thing was. 4, adopting new science-based ideas for the innovative, coordinated, green, open, and shared development, which is interesting because China's, I believe, somewhere around 30% of the CO2 producing in the world, 29.4.
They're a major
CO2
producer.
emissions.
Oh, huge! Yeah, most of it's coal.
I think they're second. You know, it's interesting. I think the United States is number 1, and I believe China's number
No,
2.
no,
No,
China's
no, no,
right
no,
here.
no, no.
There
China's
you
way
go.
worse.
Yeah. US 14.3%.
Yeah.
Yeah. China, I mean, they're like up there with other,
They're up
that's
there with
every other
everybody
part of the
else.
world.
5 countries.
Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So yeah, I
Oh,
hope they're
I
really
wasn't
looking at that
expecting
green
that.
policy they're talking about
Oh
there.
my
They're not.
god.
They're not, of course
No.
not. Yeah.
Well,
No,
I
they
don't know. We'll
what
get
we
into
get
that
into
later.
Per capita, they are lower than the U.S. Yes, they are.
That's well, they have 1 billion people, so that
I
is,
was-
Yeah,
okay.
1.3 billion people exactly.
Yeah.
They have a whole
That is
billion more
exactly
than us.
Most of that's done by probably 10% of the population, and the rest live out in huts. But okay, yeah.
yeah. So
Fucking
number 5 now,
racism is
following
racism moment.
socialism.
Like fucking
Yeah.
it was the same geezer. Like, what the fuck? Like, most of them live out in huts. What the fuck was that? Like,
Yeah.
fucking half of America can't read. Who the fuck are you talking about living in fucking huts? Like, genuinely, more of China is literate than fucking America. Like, what the fuck we going on with there? I'm on about, like, if you just look at the fucking rural regions, you probably find more literacy in China than you would in America. Like, it's not funny to fucking talk shit. And I'm not talking shit on America. I'm stating the truth with America. This is just some utter bollocks. Like, no. This is the type of shit you hear people push about African nations, and it's just distinctly racist. I mean, like, it's like that reductive shit where everyone's like, fucking, the Americans are beaten by Indian farmers. Indian farmers, Indo-Chinese farmers, and it's like, those farmers were also soldiers. They were not just farmers. Like, don't undermine them as just a bunch of people with wooden hats in fields. Like, it's like, yeah, but those people with the wooden hats in the fields were the soldiers, because they're just people that were fighting a war. That were in a nation that was trying to cement its freedom and industrialize. I mean, this is the process of struggle. Like, it's reductive bullshit to just push this Anglo-Saxon supremacy bullshit over the colonies of any fucking country. And China isn't even one of the weaker countries of the world. China is one of the more powerful countries of the world. The British Empire was trying to groom it at one point before the revolution. And afterwards, I mean, we, like the European Union and the United States, have been constantly investing capital into China to try and gain some form of dominance over its markets.
Yeah. I mean, considering fucking China's role history-wise as one of the, you know, empires of the world, it's pretty fucked up.
Indeed.
Makes sense that they're back, but still it's weird. It's like, I remember one of the reasons why the Spaniards wanted to find out if the world was round was because they didn't wanted to go through the Ottoman Empire in order to get to China, and Asia. It was, one of the driving things of Europeans to go to the Americas was because they wanted to get to Asia. And then they got to the Gulf and, started fucking up with everyone.
Guys, we
They saw
swear they're
it.
Indians, we promise.
Yeah, guys, we're in the Indias. This is how they look like. I have a book. They have jungles.
I have
They
a
must.
painting. It's
Yeah.
a bit wrecked from the journey here. Someone puked on it. I have a painting.
Yeah.
With Chinese characteristics, with people as the masters of the country. So
It's capitalism.
Yeah. People at this massive country. Chinese characteristics. I'm getting feedback from someone. Which is essentially saying we'll adapt socialism, something that organically fits with us. We don't need to follow this universal plan written from 200 years ago. 6, governing China with rule of law, so law and order, of course. 7, practice socialist core values, including Marxism, communism, and socialism with Chinese characteristics.
So he's drawing a distinction between the three.
Yes. You see, yeah. And once again, what do you think's really running their economy? Marxism or socialism with Chinese characteristics?
Yeah.
Number 8, improving people's livelihood and well-being is a primary goal of development. And they have done that. They have improved their nation materially, for sure. 9, coexist well with nature, with energy conservation and environmental protection policies, and contribute to global ecological safety. So we're talking about thorium plants. They're starting to create nuclear plants. That is probably the best option for green energy today, and we do see China ahead of us on that. So maybe they do see a world where they can power it through nuclear.
And their coal plants are much cleaner than ours, but part of that's just because they're newer.
The clean coal. Here we go. Welcome to Kekistan, everyone.
Yeah. They got the clean coal Trump was always talking about. Number 10, strengthen the national security of China. 11, the Chinese Communist Party should have absolute leadership over China's People's Liberation Army. 12, promoting the one country, two system for Hong Kong. And how do you pronounce that? Macau? Macau? Macau?
I think. No.
With the future of complete national reunification, and to follow the One China policy and 1992 consensus for Taiwan. So the One China policy is bringing all these people back into China. 13, establish a common destiny between Chinese people and other people around the world with a peaceful international environment. And 14, improve party discipline in the Chinese Communist Party. So what is definitely missing from here is the class struggle, right? This is one of the central.
The fascist was the guy to have to say that. Everyone needs to just take a moment to think about that.
That's something I always find funny. That fucking fascists can tell that something isn't socialist, And then you have people like Caleb mopping me like, "Oh, you're Russian socialist." Like,
Yeah, but these guys don't only say it's not socialist. They say they like the fact it's not socialist.
Yeah, to them it's a good thing, of course, but
they called it a regional corporatist system. That makes them shiver at the knees and fucking coom. Like they love a good corporatist system. They'll whip that shit up for breakfast like it's eggs on toast. Fucking strips of bacon.
Yeah. Couldn't put it there.
They hate fucking Spanish people, but Americans are the only fucking people who eat more pork than the Spanish. It's a fucking double on, especially anyone who knows how much like they devour pig in Spain. They'll fucking eat feet, and that's not me being offensive. Like I'm saying, like they eat the whole fucking thing. Like fair play on them for being efficient, but pick a better animal is all I'm gonna say.
Don't be mean towards pig, okay? They are tasty.
No, I'm being mean towards Spanish people.
Like I have Spanish descent, man. I feel attacked by that.
Fair enough. You have a right to feel attacked. And I fuck.
All right, I can pull a Haas and say that I have fucking Arab, that I'm Arab because of my grandmother. My half Czechoslovakian, half quote unquote Arab grandmother.
Czechoslovakian, Arab, Spaniard.
Yeah, that's my mom.
A Czecholo Spaniard.
No, my mom is descendant from a Turkish guy and a half Arab, half Czechoslovakian woman.
You're like an iron brew.
Yeah, I'm like bronze, but not funny.
The essentially the collective of what's it, European heritage in a nutshell.
I'm a fun
You
guy.
got the Mongolian heritage, so Hitler won't like you. You're already off the table for Hitler being a fan. He
What
thinks the
about
Mongolians
Benito?
were a horde. His words, not mine.
What about Benito? Am I still good in his books?
I don't know. Like, I mean, maybe before Hitler decided to have a whine at him and go, "Yo, why are you not being racist?" Even though he just wasn't being racist enough in Hitler's eyes. Hitler got really whingy with Benito.
Yeah, they had dinner dispute. Not fun.
Explodey gasoline.
You
It's
said.
Mussolini every time he ate baked beans.
Jesus, that's not even funny.
Yeah, it is. Fuck you.
I'm laughing at how unfunny that is. Jesus.
No, you.
You
Tenets
just
of
pull a
Marxism.
fat joke
And
about
this is
Mussolini stuff.
Well, yeah, because the guy's a weasel.
A fucking fat joke, man.
It, it this is a professional stream. I don't know what you're on about.
they do
I'm
have
sorry anyone who
I
is
am
watching.
I
I'm
am
sorry.
wearing my Caleb Moppin and aficionado uniform. How dare you insult me in
Yeah, you're wearing your tinfoil
my team
hat.
Moppin kit.
Yeah.
different classes now in China. And in fact, interestingly enough, I think in 1982, they took out the freedom to strike out of their constitution. So they're still allowed to strike. I mean, people still, they didn't say it was illegal to strike, but they took it out of their constitution that it was, you had the freedom to strike. So today, when you see strikes with them, once again, it's another corporatist model here. And I'll bring up this diagram too. That when there are strikes, the government will step in and say, "Hey, you guys better figure this out and get things done." And usually that's what happens. The employer and the employees will figure something out, and they'll usually put a Band-Aid on something. The workers won't get everything, but they'll get something from it.
Who else did that?
Yeah, I wonder who else did that.
Mussolini?
Yeah. Pure corporatist system.
Told you they get really giddy about it. Like,
Well, I would
fucking rubbing
what's
their
at
hands
this point, I would
together.
ask communists, what's the difference between
The excitement in their voices. Woohoo! It's like Mussolini.
It's just like the good times.
Back in the day when you were there. I'm clicking play, but it's not playing. Here we go.
what China's doing right now
Yeah,
and the
the
corporatist models
rest
of
of
the
them.
1920s and 30s.
Professional.
Yes. Well,
Like,
there's
there's a
not much.
distinction.
Yeah. There's not much. That's the problem. And once again, if that's what Marxism was actually, you probably wouldn't have had a third position. They probably all became Marxists, but that's not what Marx was preaching. Just can't bring up this. Let me do it like this. See if this works. It's not letting me share the entire screen. I want to bring up this corporatist model that China runs off of right now.
You got a point.
So not pulling up.
No, it's not allowing me
He
to
will
find the
eventually
window.
figure it out.
that
He's
it
just
is up in.
troubleshooting himself.
Because it's a
with the
PDF document,
computer.
so it's not a
An image.
yeah.
You might have to save it as a JPEG.
Yeah, let me try that real fast.
Well, there's a few things I'd like to add in here that didn't really fit into a category.
Mhm.
They don't really have an income tax. Maybe 5% of their taxes come from income tax, so it's a very small income tax. There's no property tax. There's only a transaction tax when property is sold. Most of the taxes are paid by businesses.
Really?
China has a middle class, but it's only about 20% of the population. So they're almost, they're not like the 1%, but they are an elite in a way, and they
do
have a
middle
lot of
class,
leverage,
but
and they're
that,
trying to
be
keep
fair,
things the
probably
same
wouldn't
way. They
surprise
don't.
me if it's 20% of the population, given the different disparities of rural to urban population. But also wouldn't surprise me if it was bigger than 20%. Like the middle class is rising in number regardless anyway. Like I don't know. Like I don't like this Spitfire. Not really gonna fucking staple anything down. It's just it's a bit too diatritic. Like I don't know. Like they like the current state of China, though. They're liking its oligarchical status. Let's see how they go about this.
Want private ownership of land in the rural areas. So they have a lot of pushback.
Well, 20% of the population, that's a really large percentage when it comes to the really large number.
Well, especially since the population is so large. But yes, but our middle class is much bigger than that.
Percentage wise, not in terms of people.
No, but you have to do it by percentages. They're not going to be like, oh, well, there's this many people that are doing well, but there's 80%. To the 80%, that's not a reasonable argument.
No. So as you can see on the screen,
oh, there you go.
Yeah, this is their corporatist model. And another thing they've taken adapted to is the nationalized trade union. This was something common in National Socialist Germany, and in fact,
this up. Sorry, let me get rid of the citation.
Fascist Italy, to where the trade unions all fell with underneath the state's protection and oversight.
Same exact thing.
So as you can see, it all starts from the central party committee, and then it's broken up into provincial party committees, city and county party committees, district and township party committees, to workplace party committee branches, and then everything else from there, all interwoven with each other, working in what is, I think, commonly, like generally accurately could call regional corporatism, as the model they're working with in China, which is a functional system, is why they're using it. It's why we advocate for a corporatist type economic model in America as well.
That's one thing I got from all my. Oh, good.
I was say I will criticize their model though, because China has been so focused on economic growth for the last, 20, 30, something like. Well, I'm trying to think. 50 years actually, probably 40, 50 years. Because Mao died in 1976. Right?
Just created a little word art thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay. So 40 years. They've been so focused on economic growth that how much are they really paying attention to the welfare of their citizens? I mean, obviously, this is helping them based upon what was happening under Mao and what they see now. It's like there has been a dramatic, increase in the standard of living and the abilities and opportunities for the people. But at the same time, I mean, there are still major issues in China with, their culture, their healthcare system, their education. So it's just like the state has struggled to really regulate the economy, or at least regulate these businesses in a way that probably maximizes the benefit to the people.
Well, that's always been my argument, and it's been eroded a little bit by studying this, but I think they're large. Before I would have said they're doing this absolutely, but now I would say they're largely doing this to retain power. Their economic moves have been, they've increased the GDP and all this and created a living standard so people don't revolt. And I think that's partially true. Now, I think some of the leadership does care about the people, but a lot of it is, like you said, it's just a very simple, like their input. They're just trying to get people to a certain economic status so they're happy, so that they're okay with the ruling elite.
Well, you could do both. You could care about the people and be Machiavellian about maintaining power at the same time, and even view them as benefiting each other, right? The happier the people are, the more they're going to support you, the more you keep power and continue to exert that power. So I think there's definitely, which we could jump into the, well, let's finish it off first. Because why I say I think they care about the people is because of the culture war they're doing, and they're not letting their people, like they're pushing it back against Western liberalism. But we'll get into that in a second. Let's lastly end with another criticism of third positionist from communists was always, you guys are about class cooperation. And we were like, yes, we're about bringing the classes together, right? Kind of shortening the gap between the classes, and then having a mutual respect for each other, as being, fellow citizens of this nation, all benefiting from the benefit of this nation. It's like, yes, that's what we agree with. And they were like, oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. Well, that's what China is today. They're about class cooperation. And so if you don't believe me, let's listen to their leader today
邓小平同志
in this speech.
和老一辈革命家支持下，党的11届三中全会 冲破长期左的错误的严重束缚，批评冲破长期左的错误的
in the speech
和老一辈革命家支持下，党的11届三中全会冲破长期左的错误的严重束缚，批评两个凡是的错误方针，充分肯定必须完整准确地掌握毛泽东思想的科学体系，高度评价关于真理标准问题的讨论，果断结束以阶级斗争为纲，
firmly ended taking class struggle as the key link. Now, it's interesting how this comes into play when you have a bunch of classes and you're trying to control a country and realize, turning the classes against each other is not the best thing for nationalism when you're trying to have a nationalistic country and you're not just some utopic spurred, writing these theories out in a book.
Oh, get on with it.
Yep.
重新确立马克思主义的思想路线、政治路线、组织路线。从此，我国改革开放拉开了大幕。
There it is. There.
They're minnows.
When the
大幕。从此，我国改革开放拉开了大幕。
This was, I believe. Hold on.
This is a fucking good thing, you fucking.
A few years back.
Wow.
It's not like just now. It's a few years back.
That stuff's pretty close, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know how to really explain it. It's just kind of huge. So if I was, I don't know, imagine being there and being like an actual communist and knowing what it's about. And I mean, I guess at this point with this speech, somebody that works over there would be aware of the sort of economic changes and everything. But, the guy just saying it out loud in front of everybody really just kind of cements, I don't know, like why are they even calling themselves Marxists at this point?
Well, he ties it to Marx. That's the whole beauty of it. Once again, you got to keep that tradition of Marx, of Mao, and all the way up to today. So
got to keep the dream of Marxism alive.
Yeah, so he literally intertwines that as like, this is, the Marxism forward. It's just like, once again, it's like George Washington in this country, or the Constitution in this country.
It's more of an ideal as opposed to necessarily the.
It's complete ideal. It has nothing to do. It's the mythos that people need. They need that. That's what their country was built off of. Marxism, communism. So it's like they can't ever say, "Well, no, guess what? We changed." They've changed, but only in their actions. The name has stayed the same, right? But the actions.
Kind of like Biden talking about democracy and then signing all these executive orders now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a mythos, but he doesn't give a fuck about democracy, or he wouldn't be signing all these executive orders.
Right.
Exactly. So we look to. Let me see if I can bring any of these up.
Fascist fetishization of China trademark.
China's cultural war here.
Yeah, but all of their economic reforms for the past 4 decades have been about shrinking that economic gap and getting rid of class warfare.
So China bans feminine men on TV. Broadcasters ordered to resolutely put an end to sissy men and other abnormal aesthetics
Here we
by the
go.
Communist Broadcast Regulator.
Yeah.
So no, they don't want that in their country. They also.
Oh my god!
And it's good to know that this is recent too, because
this is recent. Yeah.
this
Well, I was
isn't
gonna
this
say-
is in the last
Yeah.
few years. This isn't the
It's
whole
like my
reign of
economic
Xi
class
Jinping.
all over
This has
again.
been
I'd say they care more
after
about their people
crackdown.
over the past 10 years.
Fascism and
Yeah.
their constant
Yeah,
fear of
China
being
bans hip hop
forced by the
culture and
market.
tattoos from all media
Funny.
sources. It's also with allowing, I believe, only
They're
4
making
hours a week of
frogs.
gaming for kids now, as well. They're making an effort to protect their people
Evil
against this
trans
degeneracy
Jewish
that they see infecting the
conspiracy.
West, but at the same time, pushing the propaganda
Yeah.
on the West that the West is too racist. Is too. I mean, look, you can't be mad at them.
They
They're
don't
playing,
want their
world politics.
fascism.
You understand what they're doing. You just wish we had a competent state here.
Agreed.
That would try to take care
I
of their
know what
people.
I just said.
So-
I'm so sorry.
Go on.
I was just say along your
They
point, them
want a
pushing on the West.
competent state that takes care of the people, yet they cite Adolf Hitler and Mussolini as their inspirations. What do they mean by "take care" in quotations? Doesn't register as what most people would think when they think of a competent state that would take care of the people. It seems more like a competent state that will take care of the people.
You know,
And
quote
do
unquote,
off
take
with
care.
the fuckers that ain't worth dealing with.
Yeah.
These
like saying-
people's idea of take care of the people is fucking concentration camp up the wrong people, and you know, these are the types of fascists that'll be like, even though the half of them are probably fucking. I mean, I know Culture Thug used to be involved with white supremacists, but now it's all about this like American nationalist instead, as if there is an American nation, lol. But the what's it? You know, these are the types of people that will like square with the criticisms of Mosley, Strasser, Parker Yockey, Dugan, and many other fascists of the Nazis, where they will say shit like, quote, they focus too much on the race issue, end quote. They don't denounce racism entirely, they just say like an overfocus on racial purity, like impossible efforts of purity, and like shit like we've got to deal with the mess we've already got. Like they don't denounce eugenic thunk, they just think Hitler was too excited about it.
Yeah.
So there's the amicability of different forms of fascism. That's them being reasonable about it. Still racist as fuck as expected. You can't really be partnered to fascism without engaging in some form of racism, even when you are trying to be more inclusive of other ethnic groups within a fascist group, because the supremacy mentality is hard to drain out of petty bourgeois class consciousness due to their drive for individualist philosophy. Collectivized individualism is also mostly labeled fascism, and I would say that applies to social democracy and petty bourgeois socialism and neo-feudalism on a whole.
Yeah. Brain rot. I was gonna say something, but my brain just threw it out. I'm too tired. I slept 3 hours, man. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's alright. I get the feeling. I don't know why I decided to put myself through the torture of doing, well, technically 3 days in a row, because I'll be doing the TIG rating tomorrow. So why do I do this to myself?
Well, as I say, it's done. Don't overwork yourself.
I am just getting things done because I need to bugger off. But
Yeah. Just you know.
Well, if this is anything I need to get for like thumbnail edits, I need someone to get the picture of Caleb mopping where he's sticking his middle finger out while he's taking the picture of Jimmy Dore, and just cut around Caleb mopping perfectly so I can just stick him on video thumbnails.
I wish I could do that, but I don't know if Paint can allow that, and I don't know if I can find that.
I use GIMP to do things like that.
I use the OG Paint, the one that comes with every computer. That's how we got
software I
like.
use is free.
That's how we get like classics like Caleb Muffin or Devil Caleb saying bundles, you
The
know.
Muffin Man. The Muffin Man.
Yeah.
I
Caleb
mean,
Muffin.
he's either the Muffin Man, he's the Muppet,
Hitler.
fucking Carrot Muppet.
Yeah, I think you guys also address him for his hair color, I believe.
Oh, the Ginger Weasel.
Yeah, that one.
Oh, look, it's a Ginger Weasel.
Yeah, that one. What else? Carpet shitter.
Oh yeah, shitteth of carpenter.
Yeah.
And then you have fucking shit liberal who eateth earth the carpet shitter.
What a title.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you got shitties
Imagine the
brains
poor
like
guy
that.
who needs to write that on his grave.
Well, I mean, like, Moppin probably eats his own shit off his own carpet too. Just wouldn't be a liberal gun. I mean, like, someone had to eat it during the lockdown, and what's it? Sometimes I wonder whether his wife is fucking like a stand-in wife for hire, so he can get good rep amongst the Christian community.
Caleb has a wife.
Yeah.
Does she wear too much makeup?
No, it's a woman from the Dominican Republic.
Mm.
She's not a babysitter. She's the posh version. What's the posh version called? A nanny. Like he specifically referred to her as that. She's a nanny, and it's like that's what Princess fucking Diana was. Princess Diana was a nanny.
Mm.
You're in the law class. You get called a babysitter. You're
that's
30 pound a night.
I asked for the makeup because I expect someone like Moppin to be like, abusive,
Well, I mean,
Just saying.
what's it? I've heard fucking rumors of like cheating and shit, so.
He's that kind of fucker.
Well, I mean, there's apparently been loads of reports of sex scandals from the CPI. It's a little more Jim Jones than may have been previously expected.
Not very surprising.
Keaton Mansfield was already someone who owns Jim Jones's books. And it's more Jim Jones than that, because even with Keaton Mansfield no longer there, the diddle fest is still continuing. Caleb Maupin and his incapacity to know where to keep his fucking hands and where not to put them.
That's a way to say it.
Well, guys, it's about, it's about the people. That's why we started this weird, what's it, how would I word it? A think tank, guys. Anyone can be a member. It's a think tank, so you can't criticize them for who's their member. It's a think tank. Anyone can join. I could join tomorrow.
Anyone can join. Only for $4.99 an art.
No. See, with think tanks, anyone can join think tanks. Like, that's the thing. That's the whole guise of things. It's like, well, you can't criticize anyone for being a member of it. Anyone can join a think tank. That's the whole logic about it all. But at the same time, like, they do these weird Camp David things where they all fucking all go camping. I don't know why I said Camp David. They all do this weird Christian camp thing. And you know, fucking, you know, these weird dress up like 1920s workers and go stand around trying to sell, not give people for free as literature that's for the people by the people. No, literature that's available online for free and not illegally for free. Like, it's freeware literature that's online. Go ahead and take that and sell that to people. Sometimes with Caleb Boppin just putting a shitty little intro at the start.
Yeah. Reminds me of that day when we started to look at the price for subscriptions to fucking Caleb's Patreon.
The bottom
Pricey
price
stuff.
is £10. Like, hey, you wanna
Yeah.
get on the Caleb Boppin bushy train, you gotta pay up big time.
Yeah. It's not cheap. It's not cheap to be a revolutionary, man.
It's a price of business.
Yeah. It's an expensive business.
Especially with how much Caleb Boppin gets fucking blasted in his bumhole. Like, has his hairy fist and only that.
Stone, don't get graphic in a stream.
There's love tension going on between those two, and you know how that's gonna end.
Yeah, I know. Everyone knows, but it's like an open secret. You know what I mean?
It's like Donald Trump and his own asshole.
Yeah.
And Spitting Image still decided to get graphic with it. That can be funny, especially if you're running out of jokes. It's a good backup. And I'm always running out of jokes. My preceding comedy is always built off a basis of I've got no fucking jokes to tell, so I'm just shitting out as I go along. I'm like fucking I'm like the mid seasons of South Park or the latter seasons of Family Guy. Just fucking shit out of the best.
Yeah. If you say enough jokes, one will land. You know?
If I do 70 cutaways, eventually you're gonna find it funny.
Yeah. You're gonna start losing your sanity. No, don't play to the nerd. Did you put the fucking emoji I sent you?
I did see it, but it's awkward to go about it because we're at a point where they're going to be switching perspectives constantly now because they're going to be showing videos.
Sad.
But look, I was just like fucking like Homer was just like completely fixated on like the absolute never verse as he pulls in. He's completely
He's on something, man.
No!
it's I just love the way he looks
His
at the
distractor
corner,
has
just
like
sitting in his
it's like the
car.
monkey with the steamy life.
I got it at the perfect time.
Yeah, just makes eye contact with the camera.
I'm ready for
Jesus.
the next moment when he says something stupid.
I always used to get
Yeah.
annoyed with people like Alex Jones who talked about the Chi-Coms in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But no, they do have a substantial investment in Hollywood in the U.S. And they definitely
Chi-Coms in
are helping to
Hollywood.
facilitate a lot of the
That's
degeneracy
right.
we see
Oh, yeah.
today.
South Africa.
Well, they're the
Um,
primary market. Like they're the primary
course they are.
viewers of Hollywood movies. They
But they're
make
edited
more money
Hollywood
out there than they do in the
blockbuster
U.S.
movies.
Well,
And
like
even
TikTok.
Well,
Well-
TikTok's very interesting. Ours
difference-
is all degenerate. Theirs is all like positive work videos.
exactly.
Yeah.
So most of the movies that we see here, the big budget movies like Fast and the Furious or like Transformers or any of those big box office movies that appear overseas in China are also heavily modified versions of the ones that we see here. They don't see the same movie that we do.
Yeah.
In one of the cases, one of the Star Wars movies, the newer ones that was released, there's a scene where the black character Finn kisses a Chinese girl in the movie, and that whole plot line is removed from the Chinese version of the film.
Why would the
Indo
Chinese do that?
Chinese.
I mean,
Exactly, right?
Universal workers,
I
man.
thought
Come
they were
on.
against racism.
Yeah.
They also made that same character, like when the promotional posters for the movie.
Yeah, they
They made him
shrink him.
smaller. They shrunk him.
They like moved into the background so you can't see him, despite him being one of the main characters.
One of the bigger characters. That's hilarious. Yeah.
So yeah, China said, well, they're smart. They're smart. They don't want their people becoming degenerate. They don't want them people falling in love with, because how are they going to support the state if they fall in love with themselves, right? And that's what they're trying to stop the people from doing, is becoming these materialistic, hedonistic individuals, atomized people that we are in the West. And so yeah, it's protecting their people and also protecting their state at the same time.
I really would be
Bingo,
interested in
right.
like an Adam Curtis take on what's happened in China vis-a-vis like public relations and propaganda, because it really seems like in Century of the Self, and I'm gonna bring it up because I just recently watched it again, the emphasis on the West for individualism and creating this like perfect consumer unit. I don't know if that played out the same way in China as it did in the West. And I don't know whether that's because China prevented that from happening or whether it was just redirected, but there doesn't seem to be, they always have been this kind of collective. So I'd be really interested to see like how
They've
they
always been
either-
that way.
but how
Yeah,
how
it's
did
part
they
of their
get
culture,
around that? Like,
tradition.
how did they prevent themselves to the degree that we have become commodified and they haven't? They have been, but to a much lesser extent than we have.
I would argue like Enlightenment philosophy that kind of
Yeah.
sprouted in the West,
Yeah.
went a long way. Like that didn't affect the Chinese. That didn't affect the Asiatic people. It didn't affect the Middle Eastern people. It didn't affect anyone really below the equator. I mean, so you see them much more, collective amount of people that are still kind of in touch with their roots and traditions, which serves as a safeguard. Like if we weren't cut from the root of our traditions or our moralities and everything else that our parents would pass on or our religion would pass on, we probably would have more of a defense against this stuff too. But we fell in love with this idea that, everyone's their own little island and this world is here for you to exploit for your pleasure. So I think that's why I think largely Enlightenment, like what our country was built off of, was perfect for taking advantage of the individual.
And that's what's
It's baked into the
unfortunate.
cake.
Baked into the cake, yeah.
What's unfortunate about the Maoist revolution is you had centuries and centuries of people who respected sort of this Confucius sort of thought of building a society and basically becoming a virtuous person and living in a virtuous society was respecting the traditions of the ancestors and passing that down throughout your lineage. And Marx, or the Maoists in the Marxist sort of tradition destroyed all that, and now China is so disconnected from that even today that you see, more recently, as we see through some of these like anti-liberal, anti-West kind of reforms, you see them really trying to define themselves as a people and a culture and who they really want to be. But it'll be interesting to see if they're trying to bring in sort of the ancient customs and sort of like the influence of the past into the way forward, or if they're trying to build something completely fresh.
Mm-hmm.
They started to reach back and bring in more Confucian thought in the 80s. But it's kind of like a mixture.
It's still disconnected, it's like
well, they have to couch everything in the power of the state, right? Because nothing can be above the state. So having a religion or a way of thought like Confucianism directly contradicts the state religion, the state ethos. So they can take aspects from it, but they can't. Same reason why they persecute Christians or all those other religious minorities within China. The state is the ultimate authority. So you can't have something like Confucius thought existing, even if they steal aspects of it and utilize it within the party.
But as far as I know, Confucius' thought was not very individualistic. It was more of the Taoist movement that was more, against sort of the hierarchies and authorities of the state.
Is what Mao is.
So I
Well,
think
even if there is something in Confucius' teachings that would contradict what the state is doing today, you can see problems arising from that. So I think
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think what Lindbergh's saying is the state has to be the strongest god. It has to be Zeus. You know,
I'm just
all the
saying that I
gods.
think the two can be integrated pretty seamlessly, actually.
Well, that's what
Because
they're starting to do. They've taken what works in their structure.
A very
and let the rest.
utilitarian approach to it. Not,
Yeah, not to treat him as a god or treat him as like a, as a saint or anything, but to just take the practicalities of his teachings and integrate them into Chinese culture.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
he's
I think there
definitely
is-
put in higher esteem than he was under Mao. I mean, they almost destroyed like the city that he was born in and all of his libraries, and thankfully that didn't happen. But
yeah.
Insane to wipe one of the greatest philosophers of the world, but especially of your nation off the face of the earth. Ridiculous. Yeah. So going on, we see China today. The game they're playing on the international stage is creating debt. Like we owe them, I think, at 1.5 trillion in debt right now as Americans, and they realize this is a good way to hold power over people. Right now, especially in the underdeveloped countries, they're definitely cashing in on this and realizing there's power to be had in people owing you money. And we can see with the countries that owe China the most, we see a lot of it in Africa. And how they do this is they're building roads, dams, infrastructure, essentially, throughout the country. But they build it for them. They send in Chinese workers. They build it for them. But the specific states owe them the money. Now they're in debt. And another thing they learned is all these countries that owe them debt, one of the things outside of us, one of the things they get them to agree with is they do not recognize Taiwan as its individual state. They recognize it as being a part of China. So that's also woven into, all of this help. Of course. I mean, it's smart. It's smart. So they're getting, unfortunately, like on the world stage, all these countries really don't have a vote. The USA can keep vetoing, and so can Europe. But still, it's smart. Everyone they have that's in debt to them, part of it is not acknowledging Taiwan. And then we'll play a quick video here to show a little bit of also what goes into their good deeds for these countries. And specifically, we go to Africa here.
January 2017, at the headquarters of the African Union here in Ethiopia, an IT engineer is looking at the servers in this building, and something seems odd. The engineer notices that often in the middle of the night, these servers are connecting to some server in Shanghai and uploading emails and audio files. The African Union headquarters was built in 2012, but it was not paid for by any African nation.
The impressive new headquarters of the African Union, entirely funded by the Chinese government.
This building was a $200 million gift from the Chinese government. It was designed and built by Chinese firms.
Nothing's for free.
Nothing's for free.
Yeah.
With Chinese money. And yes, the servers were installed by Chinese engineers, who, it appears, left an intentional backdoor into the servers so that they were easily accessible. The African Union IT team eventually removed these Chinese servers and installed new ones. The Chinese government literally offered to install them for them, but they declined. The local IT people also swept the building, and they found microphones embedded in the furniture and in the walls. The whole building was bugged and had been feeding audio and internal emails to China for like 5 years since the building was built. China building a headquarters for the African Union and then spying on it is a pretty good symbol of what China is up to in Africa.
All right. We need to see that. It's actually a great video. I should link it underneath this video. It goes into that. But yeah, they're smart in that sense. Unlike us in America, we'll go set up shop in a foreign country. We'll try to change their culture.
Like they find this like horrible thing, and they're like, "Yep, nope, they're smart in that sense."
Well done.
Round of
Jesus
applause.
Fucking Christ. It's like, this is also very telling for any kind of like communist, quote unquote, who wants to claim that China isn't like fucking imperialist or fascist. Even fascists like China. Come on. I cannot point it out more myself. If the fascists are clapping at what China's doing, the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, literally, like fucking, you don't get to just actively, you You ain't picking your crowd just outright because you don't get to choose whether you even have a crowd in the first place. Your crowd chooses you based on what you represent, and if you represent something that foundatively is attractive to fascists, probably something wrong with what's going on with what you're doing.
Yeah. Only fascists I see here in the Lumpen world is that the fucking guys sent by Caleb or fucking Zionists who come every now and then.
You just don't understand the fascism like Caleb does. As in, the ass backwards way Caleb does.
Yeah. But really, to anyone watching the stream right now, if you are a communist and you see China as socialist, either call yourself fascist or rethink what you're doing because China isn't socialist and you shouldn't look it as socialist. I don't there is no excuse to that one. They're just not. They're not going towards socialism. Like China will be socialism, but not because of the Chinese government, not the Communist Party right now, you know. Maybe in the future they will have a revolution. Well, not maybe. They will have a revolution. And it's like we cannot just suck up on China because they have a red flag. Because I think that's the only reason why anyone will see them as socialists. Because they keep the fucking symbols, some of them. Jesus. Just piss me off. It's like I don't get, and I don't get anyone who will let like Tengists or fucking or people who like whatever the Chinese government calls what they're doing right now. Fucking
Socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Thank you for correcting yourself. But like
National socialism, but we don't want to say national socialism. Hitler gave that one a bad label. So socialism with Chinese characteristics. It's just a nice way to say
patriotic
Chinese nationalism.
socialism. You need to look at what Caleb said and between the difference between patriotic and nationalism. Okay?
If you
You need to
squint
study.
and make screaming noises so hard that you shit yourself, you'll start to figure out what Caleb's saying. But until you've reached that level of pure shriek, the brown liquid has fucking started to slither down your leg, you have not reached the level of Marxism Caleb Maupin has.
Again with the graphic stuff, but very well said.
Pure liquid fucking ass.
The more democracy. China's not going in there and saying, well, you need to behave like this now. They just want the debt. It's, like,
It's all economic.
Yeah, it's all economic.
Well, if anything,
IMF.
Look at them like, oh, it's all economic. Ooh. I just watching them just fucking get all fucking giddy about how China does imperialism. They're like, this is how Hazel Mosley talked about it in the scriptures.
Well, the biggest thing is they're doing all of this for
the textbook of the British Union of Fascists or buff.
The betterment of the Chinese people, right? Like they don't.
Yeah, the BUF.
The buff. It sounds like a fucking VPN service or some shit like that.
A little U instead of a big U. He said he got a little U in the middle.
Yeah, little U.
The B-U-P. It's not just letter P, it is letter P.
But yeah, I fucking.
It'd be funny to people who use Greek symbols.
Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I feel the need to remark on this one because it's very important that when it comes to looking at China and countries like this, even Cuba, Vietnam, any kind of example of socialism that we could have today, you need to look at it critically. You don't need to look at what they say they want to do. You need to look at what they are doing. Same with people, and you need to always be open to criticize.
Are you
There are a
almost
lot of
suggesting that dialectical materialism is an empirical philosophy? Because fuck me, you're gonna anger the Dengists. They like rationalism. A book
let me
says
let me
thing
finish.
is good. How dare you look to reality?
Stan, we can talk about me looking at reality, being a real idealist later. Okay, let me finish quickly. Like fucking, you need to be open to criticism and criticize. You know, it's very important that you follow those principles, because if you don't, you will be repeating the mistakes of the past. That simple. And you will be a shithead. And that's not good. And fucking, it is also good to be open to criticism, because it allows you to grow and understand errors. If I started whining like a little bitch when Stone corrected me about the name of that region in China, I wouldn't be here. I'd be crying in a corner without learning. If you aren't open to learning, which comes with criticism, you ain't a communist. You know what I mean?
You end up
You should
being
label yourself something else, but you're not a communist.
yeah, you end up being someone who spends half their time causing trouble for actual socialists and the rest of their time shitting in the middle of their floor. Hate up
Yeah.
mopping. Uh, CPI USA, not to get confused. The CP USA, the PC USA, the PCP USA.
CPA USA.
CBA. Can't be asked USA.
Yeah, but basically
Think
that's
Wang.
that's my point. Be open to criticism and criticize. Don't be afraid to do it. All right? And that goes for everyone. It's not just for people who are starting to get into communism or some shit like that, because it doesn't matter how many years you have into studying any kind of communism or praxis that you have. You need to be open to criticism. That's very important. And you need to criticize anything. You need to be open to do that. And if you ain't, you will cause problems to actual socialists, to actual revolutionaries around the world, as it has happened, as it is happening, and as it will happen. You know? But it is important to start to fight against those things, because we can rely on what is called professionalism all the time. And professionalism, for those who don't know, it's when someone bases what they know because someone with a title said it. You know? It's like if Stone showed me like a diploma and I just listen to Stone because he showed me a diploma. I don't, I don't listen to Stone because he shows me a diploma. I listen to Stone because he says sound stuff. And if he doesn't, I will call him out on it. If I notice, as everyone should. And no one should be afraid of it. You will do more harm than good to not criticize someone openly than to, do it. You know, it's like with the whole things of like silence is genocide, right? That comes because if you don't talk about what Israel is doing, if you don't criticize them, you might as well be helping them, right? Same with this. If you're not criticizing your fellow comrades when they say some dumb shit, you might as well become a fascist at that point, because you're helping them, you're helping the bourgeoisie, the petty bourgeois, and their interest more than that of the proletariat and the lumpen and the what we are fighting for, essentially. So that one is very important. I think everyone should take a moment um, to think about it. At least at least once every now and then, to criticize not only others and things around you, but oneself as well, and be open to it. Don't react with fear or with anger when your comrade is telling you that you're wrong, but instead listen to his criticism, right? And also criticize the criticism, because maybe they're wrong or not. It's the process of learning, which is something very beautiful and necessary in the revolutionary struggle against capitalism. Now, I'm gonna go get a glass of water.
Well said. It's good stuff. I mean, that's the sort of the process of Marxian struggle. I mean, as Mao put it, criticize, criticize, criticize. It's our attainment as people who look at things from a philosophical angle of how do we take the sciences and apply them to the modern condition, and figuring out what the current contradictions are and how we solve those contradictions. The drive of electrical materialism and how it looks at the world. And a conclusion is that socialism, the proletarian struggle, is the drive forward. And that it is them who will take dialectical materialism and turn it into the philosophical sword that needs to be to drive struggle forward. It's in their hand. And it's in our fucking hands. The Lumpen proletariat and the proletariat will fabricate that sword of philosophy out of dialectical materialism. We are utilizing it on a universal basis and drive the revolutionary struggle forward. That is the process of Marxian philosophy.
They don't want to influence other cultures in any way. That's anything but negative, right? Because they just want to elevate the Chinese above everyone else, which is smart.
Oh yeah. Oh, even
what every country should be doing, to be honest.
Well, it is, and then but it's so different. Like they send in the Chinese engineers and all of this to build these things, and they hire the local population to work, so they're adding to the economy. But at the same time, they have like segregated eating halls and all this. You know, all the Chinese ate with each other, and so liberal media tried to hit them with that some years back, saying how racist they were. But no, they weren't getting involved in the country. They were there to build this project and then go home, and that was it. And yeah, they're gonna put a couple bugs in the couches. They're gonna have a couple back doors there, but
yeah, they gave it for free. At least they can give them some info.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the Western powers want to say how evil China is, but that's the same thing that European powers did in the Middle East with oil.
Yeah,
that was why there was a lot of revolutions in Iran and Iraq and all that. Is because these companies weren't giving the local population. They were employing them, but they weren't giving them much percentage of the profits, hardly anything. So, yeah, I think China's actually being more fair than they were being.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. But they are still playing the same game at the end of the day. This is not simply to help people. I mean,
but at least they're honest about it too. They're not. They don't have this. They don't act like they're too much. They don't act like they're.
Well, they do act like they're doing it all for the goodness of building up the world, but at the same time, it's it's building them up more in particular. Yeah. But yeah, it's not as dirty as Western imperialism has been.
What do you guys think about the increasing surveillance in China, though, in their own country over their own citizens?
Oh yeah, that's going to come with the times with every country. You're not going to get away from cameras all over the place. That's Pandora's box opened on that.
But do you think it's much worse in China now than it is anywhere else in the world?
It's always been pretty heavy in China. They were like before us, where you're like, wow, imagine us having cameras everywhere, and here we are.
Well, for one, though, like the Chinese social credit system, it's not everywhere in China. It's only in certain provinces and certain cities. It's not like a whole national thing. It hasn't been rolled out everywhere. And the reason why is because they're using different provinces and districts as like test beds for different methodologies.
They'll get there eventually.
Yeah. Well, some areas might be way more tyrannical than other areas, right? And I think what they're trying to do is draw a fine line to the point where their people won't revolt and try to kill them at some point, and to where they can still, guide the social and cultural aspects of the country in the direction that they want,
as much as they can.
As much as they can. So, I mean, personally, I'm still of the mindset that I'm very much, against I mean, I'd very much be against our country now. I'm very much against them spying on and looking at my data, but that's just because I know that they're doing that in an effort to harm me.
Yeah.
But at least in China, whether or not you like what they're monitoring you for, you could make the argument that what they're doing is in the collective, is in everyone's best interest. It's not explicitly designed to harm them. It's designed to make them better people. Now, whether or not you think that the government has a hand in forcefully making people better people, well, that's a whole nother discussion. But
it always comes down to motivation. I'm still not sold on China being caring, like their main motivator being caring about their people. But
I think it benefits them though to care. That's what I'm saying. I think it's not for a moral reason. Maybe it is, but let's say it's not for a moral reason. It makes sense for them to keep power. And we'll get into we're coming up on 2 hours, so we'll get into their military and then the future of China. But a part of that is like their anti-wokeness. We'll see in these military commercial comparisons as we start going into the military here.
That might be a good segue point. That might be good to play that, and then we can just roll.
I literally just said I was going to do that.
No, nice. Well, fuck you.
It might be a good idea to play with military videos.
So they are protecting.
To play with military videos.
No, nice. Well, fuck you.
It might be a good idea to play with military videos.
It might be a good idea to watch Caleb mopping videos, or am I hearing things?
So they are protecting their citizens in the sense of they want the best their citizens can be, because that's going to contribute to the state. It's once again a third positionist mentality. You build up the citizen, you don't tear him down, because he's going to be the best producer for the collective at his highest potential. And this is what China seems to get.
They both build each other up. Yeah.
Yes. Even the narration.
一声道是一句承诺。军长同志，一方前准备完毕，请指示。什么？一声道。
Where's the base black pig walking to her degree? Where's that at? I don't see that. Where's that? What's wrong with China?
是一种割舍。一声道是一次重塑。
See, they have women in there, Chinese women.
Look, they have
not any of those scenes.
No. Very specifically in clinical settings.
So these guys know where women eat through.
Know more about them than has the.
I don't see any stories about lesbian mothers.
Yeah, I mean, do they not know how to run a military?
You gotta set low bar with fascists.
Oh, we're gonna whoop their asses. They don't got pregnant women flying their airplanes.
Pregnant women are the best soldiers.
Maternity flight suits. What?
Yeah.
Maternity flight suits win. Yeah.
Women.
Fuck with us, China. You don't even know.
I just hear monkey noises
get
too.
chopped off in our military and become a girl.
Yeah. They're all just talking women, military women.
Get ready, everybody. He's about to do something stupid.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, gentlemen, but you seem to have me confused with a character in a fictional show. Now, if you'll excuse me, my fondue is just about...
我有忠诚，筑起长城，改革强军，征途如虹。
They're one aircraft carrier.
Yeah, literally they're one aircraft carrier. Yes.
No, they have two.
Oh, they have another one now.
Yeah, didn't it just come out in 2020 or this year?
That's a great question. I don't know.
They just built it.
Yeah.
是人民军队不断发展的康庄大道。人民军队的力量来自改革创新，人民军队的胜利来自改革创新。
祖国召唤，我必到。
That's no picture. What's cool?
一声道，一声道。
It's like a freaking movie trailer.
Militarism.
Oh, the Russian one's great too.
Yeah.
The Russian one's fucking awesome.
Не имеет значения. То, кем ты был прежде, уже никого не волнует. Теперь важно то, кем ты будешь сегодня. Что ты знаешь о себе? На что ты способен? Вопросы могут остаться без
Makes me want to join the Russian
ответа.
military.
Shut up, Lou.
He's not gonna join.
No, you're 100% right though. This does.
Каждый день здесь боль закаляет. Шрамы, повседневность. Это ты решил себе что-то доказать. Командир здесь только для того, чтобы ты мог увидеть врага. Потому что без врага нет боя, а без боя нет победы. Но на самом деле...
We used to do videos like this.
I know.
Вчерашний ты. Твоя задача выследить врага, догнать его, превзойти, стать лучше, чем он, и вернуться назад победителем. Потому что завтра первый день твоей новой жизни.
See the home team now. Yay! USA.
Flat art already.
Seems like a freaking cartoon.
We already see where this is going, guys.
That's. Oh, I thought that was it.
I wish that was
This is
it.
the story of a soldier who operates your nation's Patriot missile defense systems.
It seems like parody. It really does. Like, it does not seem like this should be real.
It begins in California
Signed off on the
with a
ship.
little girl raised by 2 moms.
Oh, Jesus.
America. Fuck yeah.
Although I had a fairly typical childhood, took
Very
ballet,
typical.
played violin, I also marched for equality. I like to think I've been defending freedom from an early age.
I can't believe I'm being forced to watch this.
When I was 6 years old, one of my moms had an accident that left her
I've been
paralyzed.
avoiding it
wanna
for
re-up?
so-
That was the
been avoiding it for so long.
But she tapped into my family's pride to get back on her feet.
Pride, get it?
Eventually standing at the altar to marry my other mom.
What the fuck's this got to do with
With
the
such
military?
powerful role models, I finished high school at the top of my class, and then attended UC Davis, where I joined a sorority full of other strong women.
Sure it was.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I began feeling like I'd been handed so much in life. A sorority
UC
girl
Davis.
stereotype.
So I wanted to join the American army and commit genocide around the world.
What had I really achieved on my own?
What a
One of my sorority
conclusion,
sisters was
man.
studying abroad in Italy. Another was climbing Mount Everest.
That's your fucking
struggle.
average
I needed my
middle
own
class
adventures,
person in the
my own
US.
challenge.
You
Yeah.
just don't get struggle like she does.
I found it. A way to prove my inner strength.
Jesus
And maybe
Christ.
shatter some stereotypes. along
I
the way.
found a way to cram your rifle down the
Doesn't look too bad.
Iraqistani's
Look
throat.
I'm a lone lord, and I answered my
Paul,
calling.
stop.
Oh my god.
And
So yeah,
you know,
that's
the fucking problem is that these douchebags, and I'm laughing at how idiotic is that militaristic propaganda about the fact that, oh, it's a woman, you know? It's wokeism.
It's a
That's the
free
shit.
march story. If this was some story about a bloke with 2 dads who was he's always just found massacre interesting. He's always wanted to be in the army because he just likes murder. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, this is great."
Yeah, that's one of the good ones.
You see, the Chinese and the Russians, it's just centered around the white male, and they like that.
Hmm.
Over here in America, you pussyfooting around with the goddamn sissies.
In the goal, you're saying we don't allow no sissies around here.
More like the US
Sorry,
gay.
Yeah. Two gay cat, 3 gay cats looking at each other. One of them is the US.
Yeah. Which is now a cat.
Yes.
Oh, my chips weren't
Pussy
ready.
I
cat.
don't know what to say to that.
yeah.
That says it all.
Well, this is exactly why I think so. There's 2 ways of looking at what we just saw, though. So the army runs very specific recruitment ads because most of the roles that the army would be involved in are logistical roles anyway, right? They're not people that are actually going to be involved in combat in any meaningful capacity. So they're trying to throw the broadest possible net at people to join the army. If you look at commercials for, say, like the Marines commercials are still actually pretty cool, right? Because they're not dumb enough to think that they want all these women Marines on the front line, right? So they're still going to push the really hard, stuff for the Marines, and then they're trying to kind of PR their way so they have people to actually join the U.S. Army. Oh, cool! Glad you were able to pull that up.
Yeah. So I mean, once again, what sticks out is naval aircraft carriers. So I mean, if there ever was a war between America and China, they would have a big issue hitting the mainland outside of Alaska. Like that would be the point of entry.
But that,
if anything, the fucking Marines probably think they'll have a better time off with the fucking women in there rather than the American men. Right? The upper echelons of the American military was well known for being overweight and unfit during the Afghanistan and Iraqi wars. I've seen pictures of like fucking sergeants stood near each other, and the Yankee sergeant's a chunky funky monkey. Fucking hell, that was a bit of a fucking there's like a poet marathon,
me.
just fucking. My chips are overcooked.
Wouldn't be their goal anyway. Their China,
I
so
don't know
China's
what's
military strategy
with
since
you always
um,
sometimes
actually
like
the reason they start
you
the year they started
become
getting the
very
most
deep.
aggressive was actually when Obama got into office, 2008. And there's a reason why a lot of people think that and why Trump used to harp all the time how Obama was too soft on China, and it's because he was. So he laxed on essentially pushing back on China within the South China Sea, and during that time, China was able to expand its influence greatly. And their whole goal at this point, militarily speaking, is to remove the United States from the Pacific theater entirely, right? So if they can get enough influence and push out far enough, they can essentially corner that entire economic zone that is the South China Sea. Do you have that picture of the South China Sea that I posted?
No, is it in the Telegram?
Yeah, it is. It shouldn't be too high up either.
All right.
The reason why, though, I mean, it gives you a good understanding of where they're at and what's at stake, I guess, in the region. Hold on, let me forward it.
Well, their focus has been neutralizing our Navy, right? Not trying to keep up with it, but
yeah, exactly. So one of the things that I was doing research on was there's this military strategy. It's called A2AD, and A2AD is essentially China's main military strategy against the U.S. A2AD stands for, the A2 is anti-access, and the AD is area denial. So the idea is they are working on technology and or trying to field military hardware that can both A2, anti-access, prevent or constrain the deployment of forces, and AD, area denial, just reduce the freedom of maneuverability within the South China Sea. So what they've done, if you guys know about the Paracel and Spratly Islands, are you guys aware of those?
Yeah.
So if you can see,
you should explain though. Yeah,
of course. So Taiwan is, so if you see Manila on the right, there's the Philippines, Manila, and right above it is Taiwan. That little green, you can't see all of it. Up further.
Yeah,
where
sliver of it on the top right.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, right there. That
right.
big island. Yeah.
Yep.
There you got Taiwan. And you see the dashed lines there. That is China's quote territorial claim over the South China Sea. Now, the two sets of islands there are in the middle of the South China Sea. This factors into their like access and area denial military strategy. So you have the Paracel Islands and the Spratly Islands. So what China's been doing over the past decade is building up these islands and basically building them into fully functional islands by dredging up sand and creating islands that they can actually place military hardware on. That means airstrips, administrative buildings, radar, sonar, everything they could possibly need. And their justification for doing this was back in, where's my notes? Back in 1982, UNCLOS was passed. That was the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It essentially established a 12 nautical mile territorial zone directly off the coast of any nation's land, a further 12 nautical miles of a limited territorial zone, and then 200 nautical miles of exclusive economic zone, or EEZs. China said, okay, well, we want more of the natural resources because they found oil and natural gas reserves within the South China Sea. China wanted access to more of the fishing and obviously the gas within the South China Sea. So what they did was they said, okay, well, let's build up these islands. Let's just take them because nobody's going to come in the way of us taking them. And this was back when Obama was in the White House and nobody pushed back. So they essentially took over the Paracel and Spratly Islands, built them up. And then they said, okay, cool. Now that we have these islands, you can't come within 12 nautical miles of these islands. And we get 200 nautical miles of exclusive economic zone that you so we can force out your fishing vessels. We can force out your oil rigs. Doesn't matter. Your oil rigs belong to me now. So they force them out. Now, later in 2016, the Hague Tribunal actually came along. They said no. So the Spratly Islands and the Paracel Islands are actually legally considered rocks, and rocks are only entitled to 12 nautical miles of territorial sea and no exclusive economic zone privileges. China still to this day refuses to acknowledge the Hague Tribunal's findings or their whatever they in a legal sense they're denying it. They're saying no, not true. We get 200 nautical miles within this area. So essentially what they're trying to do now And what's hard for some people to realize, and most people don't realize, is it is very hard to patrol the ocean for a lot of reasons, right? I used to think that, we just had satellites that could look down and you could see everything in the ocean. And, it was easy to monitor where vessels were coming and going. Not true. It's actually very difficult. Satellites obviously can't see through clouds. And that's a huge issue because the South China Sea, just due to the climate and temperature, it's very difficult to monitor actual naval vessels. So the fact that China's been able to expand their influence within the South China Sea and build radar systems and everything else, they're better equipped at this point to push back against U.S. influence. And what they've also done, they have essentially taken land from two of these South Asian countries have tried to push back against them, and they haven't succeeded. And I believe that is both the Philippines and Vietnam for sure. Malaysia has been the only South Asian country that has kind of pushed back against China's expanding influence. And the Philippines, obviously, we have military bases over there in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, though, so people always make this argument like, oh, well, the United States has aircraft carriers, right? Aircraft carriers are the best. Well, not necessarily. There are certain weapons that China and Russia have been perfecting, both coastal defense cruise missiles and air defense missiles. But also the advent of hypersonic missiles has meant that aircraft carriers are becoming increasingly obsolete on the global stage. They're very expensive. They're very slow. They're very hard to maintain. Obviously, I mean, the United States has 11 of the damn things, and the next country that has the most is China, which has 2. And I believe there's only 8 countries on the planet that even have an aircraft carrier. The United States is only able to build and maintain these as a result of our current position on the global stage, but that is increasingly becoming not the case. China realizes that China has the largest navy on the planet. It's just not the same naval assets that we have, right? So they have a total of 700, according to Global Firepower, they have 777 total naval vessels. That's 2 aircraft carriers, 50 destroyers, 46 frigates, 72 corvettes, 79 submarines. They have the most submarines of any country on the planet. They have the most frigates. They have a considerable amount of patrol vessels and mine warfare. They have lots of mines in the South China Sea as well, which is interesting that I found out. But China isn't worried about the United States militarily. I'm fairly convinced that the United States does not pose a substantial threat to China. And I don't think that the United States would even intervene in the event that China does eventually invade Taiwan or whatever ends up happening there.
Yeah, these numbers, they disagree. We found your numbers. So maybe the truth's somewhere in the middle with the destroyers. Maybe. They say only 14. But what is interesting, which I didn't know, combat aircraft.
China's more,
yeah. I did not know that.
But it's about quality, not just quantity.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Like
they
flying
have been,
F-16s
they have been improving their quality.
What's interesting though is they have their J-20 is their newest generation warfighter, which is I believe had technology stolen from the F-22 Raptor, but they produce all the materials and everything in-house. Going back to talking about the semiconductors, right? Most of the semiconductors are produced in Asia, and a lot of those semiconductors are the same semiconductors used in Lockheed Martin products, right? Raytheon, Halliburton, all these U.S. defense contractors use materials created by China or countries owned by China, i.e. Taiwan. We're only able to keep producing these things because there is a economic need on China's behalf to keep facilitating the creation of this new military hardware. And I would be very surprised if the U.S. thought that in the event of an actual armed conflict that would continue to exist, right? That kind of relationship. Because at this point, I know we were talking earlier, China's end goal might, they might just be doing this stuff because they believe in the morality of, doing right by their citizens, or they could be thinking long-term global domination, in which case them doing all this is just them incrementally pushing and seeing how far they can go before the U.S. actually retaliates.
I think that's without a doubt their plan. I mean, to become the global power. I mean, this is why they're getting all these countries in debt too, owing them and working with them, forcing them to acknowledge Taiwan as a part of China. So let's wrap this up on this: China's future, Taiwan in particular. So let me throw this out there. By 2024, is Taiwan a part of China or not? What do you guys think?
I think so.
Okay, you think so, Bill? What do you think?
No.
Deebs?
I got no idea.
Apollo?
I really don't know.
I'm gonna say no, but I really don't. I don't know for sure.
I think they will be. I think Biden is the perfect sellout. I mean, all the business they did with China, how weak our military is right now. We just saw the commercials. We see who our military is recruiting, and we see who China and Russia is trying to recruit. Different breeds of people, essentially. I think this is the perfect president, the perfect time. With COVID, with us at each other's throats, that they could just march into Taiwan. I wonder if Taiwan will even put up a fight. I'm starting to think they might just be able to march in there with a few skirmishes and take the country.
I don't think they need to risk it. Is the thing. They just
they give them so much control. I mean, if we go back to that map, and then plus semiconductors, which the whole world relies on, for them to have that,
they're building up their military just so they can defend themselves. They might want to be aggressors in the future, but the best way for them to conquer Taiwan is economically, and they're already doing that.
Well, I mean, they don't even need to conquer them economically. All they have to do is get enough of the other countries in the world to agree that Taiwan is part of China, and it just de facto becomes China. I mean, that's kind of been their play the whole time. That's why they have these maps with the 9-dash line, all this, their belief that this just belongs to them. And if they keep saying it long enough, eventually,
but as long as America has that veto power, as long as Europe, right? These are like the biggest blocks of voting. Are in
I don't
the
think
UN
they're going to risk it yet. Even though Biden is as weak as he is, everything that you've said about Biden and this administration is true, but I just don't think they're willing to risk it yet.
I think if anything happens, it will happen.
They're doing 21 questions on China.
I don't know.
During the midterms. I think that is the perfect time.
What was that? Sorry?
I don't know. No, I'm just thinking of what they're saying. I'm more focused on their reaction when it comes to how they react to China becoming more powerful than the US.
They're seething at it. They don't like it, but they like it, but they don't like it. It's like when fascists fantasize over Israel, but then have to say anti-Semitic shit to fill in for the fact that they're jealous that the people they saw as lesser before are now doing fascism better than them. It hurts them right in the pee hole.
Yeah, they're jealous. Like, it's odd. I always try to look at behaviors of the middle class because it's something odd to look at. Because they don't behave like I would expect any person to behave like. They're very weird. They're very weird. They're very contradictory too. But, comes with the field, I suppose.
In their own world, as it might be.
Yeah. I send you a meme.
Sometimes you wish you have the same drugs that they're fucking on, because they're on summit to be fucking living in the world they live in. Like, there is some fucking there is some acid in the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
The Kool-Aid tastes funny, but they haven't signed the Death Pact cult stuff yet, so it's not the cyanide like it was with Jim Jones yet. Instead, it's just acid, so Moppin actually looks like he's making sense.
One of my friends has like fucking weed oil,
Marijuana oil.
Yeah.
Don't tell George Bush.
No, don't worry, he's into that too.
I know. I mean, fucking, what's it? Lincoln was a big fan of fucking smoking dub.
The devil's lettuce. You could tell that to Caleb if you ever talk to him. That will for sure make him cry a lot. Yeah.
Those that don't get it, I'm being narratively smart because middle class people are actually the biggest users of fentanyl. Not just fentanyl, but opiates in general. But when people talk about the rise of fentanyl in America, like most people who are on bum ass porn on the streets, they're just having to deal with straight cut heroin, and you know the the users of things like fent or morphine or anything like that, they're always middle class.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the middle class are the fuckers that are like, oh yeah, trans people bad, and then they consume like a shit ton of like trans porn and shit like that. It's very fucked up. This specimen, as they will put, and his friends, including the nerd, who will be remembered as the nerd, and we got to reflect on the shit that they're saying, on criticism, and we cracked a few puns, a few jokes, a few hee-hees and ha-has, with a bit of ho-hos.